What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. All right, so we're going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos I did in the past and put them together into one big video. Today's full story video is all about Gambit. You see, in 1999, you had Marvel give our good old boy Gambit his own ongoing series. Now, the ongoing series ran for about 25 issues, ending the year 2001. But I thought it'd be a good idea to go ahead, take all 25 issues, and put them together into one big video, a full story video. So I do hope you enjoy. Here we go. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. So we're going to pick up with some good old Gambit. Yes, you heard that right. We're going to sit down and talk about Gambit's first ongoing series that came out in the late 1990s. Now, by this point in Marvel Comics, it was really more Marvel trying to just ride that good old gravy train when it came to the X-Men. And the reason why I'm saying that because in the 1990s, there are only a few characters who were able to get their own solo books that were ongoing books. So like Wolverine, Cable, or X-Men. For the most part, if you were part of the X family, you were part of some team and you only appeared in that team book like X-Force, Excalibur, X-Factor, things like that. And so for Gambit, he was really popular, but at the same time, it was also Marvel saying, hey, we need another X book to kind of help keep us up. And so, of course, we got Gambit. But honestly, it made a lot of sense because he was really popular. A lot of folks want to be Gambit, know more about Gambit when he first appeared in Marvel Comics. Now, the opening pages of this storyline does a great job in introducing some new characters, but also reintroducing some old characters as well. Like, for example, a character known as Anwar Anabar. Now, for Anwar, he is the CEO of the military research firm better known as Elysian Enterprises. And another character known as Segment Conaway. Now, for her character, she is an engineer, right? She's mining the past for treasures that will serve the future. Now, these two characters had came together for a particular mission. And their mission is really more of them going into different tombs across the area. And the reason why, because they're trying to do research on a great world leader from the past that had led the world for 1,000 years. Now, the problem is that how in the world was he able to survive that long? And so when it comes to Conaway, she believes that for this great leader, he has some kind of celestial technology, alien technology that kept him alive for thousands of years. Now, technically, she is right because she is talking about some character who is an external. Now, the external that she's talking about is a character known as Saul. Now, when it came to Saul, he is an external, which is a mutant that has the ability of immortality. So like Apocalypse or like Gideon or Selene, other character we met in our coverage over the X-Men. But when it came to Saul, he was able to live for a long time because, well, he was a mutant. He was an external. And so he was this great leader who had all these different tombs across the world. Now, in each tomb, he kind of left behind different kinds of artifacts. Now, when it came to Saul, the only reason why he met Apocalypse is because Saul had found this spaceship, right? But when it came to Saul, he was well known as this great magician. And so for Apocalypse, he wanted to know more about the magic that Saul had to learn magic from him. But for Apocalypse, he also found a celestial spaceship that Saul had been studying. And so you had Apocalypse take that spaceship away from Saul. Now, with all that being said, when it came to Saul, he had all these different tombs across the world. Each tomb, he left something inside there. And so for Conaway and Anwar, their main goal right now is to go inside each tomb to collect more information about him, but use the past to make a better future, possibly past technology for a future technology. Now, they do have another character with them, and that will be Agent Denty. Now, we have met him a while back in our coverage over the X-Men, but by a different name, better known as the Executioner. Now, this guy does hate mutants, but in a different way. He hates mutants who are technically guilty, the ones out there who commit crimes, who become dangerous. That's his goal, to only go after mutants that are dangerous. And he does use different artifacts from the past enemies of the X-Men to go after mutants who are, again, dangerous. And so right now, he was kind of hired to help them get at each tomb and get through all the different security measures left behind by Saul. Except they don't realize that somebody else had already made their way into the temple. And of course, that would be our boy Gambit. Now, the reason why Gambit is here is kind of a callback to an earlier storyline that we had covered, better known as the Trial of Gambit. Now, in that storyline, we had discovered that for Gambit, he had a major hand in the idea of the mutant massacre. And so with that storyline being out there still, it still kind of affects future books that came after it, like this one right here. Now, for our boy, we see him being able to get through all the different traps that were left behind by Saul and being able to grab the treasure, this gauntlet. Now, once he's able to grab it, he does get the heck out of there, and he does run into all our new characters and old characters as well. But for Gambit, he's somebody who knows how to escape. This man is one of the greatest thieves in the whole entire world. He has to know how to get away. And so once he does get away, it also establishes the idea that for Gambit, he now has some kind of connection with Conway, possibly another love interest besides Rogue. But you didn't have Gambit meet up with another character, better known as the Courier. Now, we have talked a lot about this character in the past when it came to our coverage over the X-Men. He's basically the perfect guy to deliver messages and also deliver items as well. Now, over time in our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to begin to learn a whole lot more about this character, but also their connection to the New Sun. Now, the New Sun was the person that has saved Gambit at the end of the Trial of the Gambit storyline, because at the end of that storyline, you had Rogue leave our boy behind in Antarctica. And so with that happening, the question was, how would he survive? Well, he was saved by someone known as the New Sun. But either way, with him going ahead and paying back his debt to the New Sun, he can now go back home to the X-Men. Now, the Gambit ongoing series had also established the idea of, telling us the origin to Gambit, kind of giving us more information, but also kind of adding some retcons there as well, because we do pick up with a character known as Jean LeBeau. Now, for Jean, he was the one who had adopted Gambit. And so when it comes to Jean, we see his dreams right now being invaded by another new character, and that would be Fontanelle. Now, for Fontanelle, with her being inside his mind, we kind of learn like the actual origin that led up to Gambit becoming part of the Thieves Guild. See, we learn here that for Jean, he was tasked to kidnap a baby. And of course, that baby would be Gambit. Now, the reason why, because Gambit had those red eyes that made him special. Now, that task was given to him by another character we're going to talk about in a later video. But when it came to Jean, he kind of felt bad about the idea of kidnapping a child. So what he did next was he handed that child over to, well, another character, better known as Fagin. Now, for Fagin, he was a monster, but also he was the child to a thief and also an assassin. Now, remember, the Thieves Guild, the Assassin Guild, they don't get along, especially now with Kendra being gone at the moment. And so back then, again, they did not get along, except you didn't have our boy Gambit fall into the Thieves Guild, but he also met Belladonna, who was part of the Assassin Guild, and their marriage was supposed to bring both sides together in peace. The problem was that when it came to Belladonna's brother, he hated the idea of his sister marrying Gambit, and so he challenged Gambit to a duel. Now, Gambit won the duel, but it killed off her brother. And of course, for the assassins, they didn't like that because now a thief member had killed an assassin. And so after that, for Gambit, he was no longer allowed to stay in that area because both sides wanted him gone. And so he left, but of course, he found the X-Men. And so that's kind of a retelling of the whole origin of Gambit, but also some new information as well. Honestly, is a perfect way to lead us back over to Gambit, who's right now staying with the X-Men. Now, for the X-Men, they allow him to come back, but at the same time, they don't completely trust him. And the reason why, because the whole idea of the mutant massacre. Because again, we found out in the earlier storyline, the dude had a part in the mutant massacre, but they're trying their best to get along with Gambit. Now, for Storm, she does inform him that he had received another message, or she had received another message from the courier to hand over to Gambit. And so while he's leaving, you have Wolverine kind of mention that the courier is someone that cannot be trusted, a very interesting character. And so for Rogue, that kind of makes her a tad bit concerned because even though she still loves Gambit, she's also trying her best to trust him again as well. Now, when it comes to Gambit, we do learn here that for his next assignment, he's been tasked to go out of his way to steal from the Elysian Enterprises again. And the reason why, because they had the Executioner delivering a package, information and materials that came from the different tombs that they had explored that were tombs made by Saul. Now, again, for Gambit, he now knows what's out of the whole entire assignment because for Gambit, he realized that they could possibly try to rebuild the same kind of spaceship that was found by Saul way back then, and of course, taken away by Apocalypse. It's the idea of the possibility of somebody else becoming Apocalypse down the road, or that information or materials could fall into his hands as well. And so for Gambit, he's kind of like, yeah, I'm down with the idea of stopping the whole entire convoy from getting over to the office building. Now for Gambit, he's able to pull this job off, but at the very last second, you do have the Executioner being able to corner Gambit. It does look like this could be his end, but luckily for our boy, Rogue had followed him. And so you have Rogue go out of her way to save him and get him far away. And of course, the job is done. But to close on the first chapter of today's storyline, we do see the Fontanelle have once again invaded the mind of somebody else. Except this time, she invades the mind of the courier, where we do learn that for Gambit's next assignment, he has to steal from the X-Men. And so as we dive into the second chapter, we're really getting into the idea of us picking up with Gambit trying to steal not from the X-Men, but really more from Moira McTaggart. Now, the first few pages of this storyline, it's really more of us seeing Gambit right now falling out of the sky. Apparently, he blew up something to stop something from happening in the world. And so when it comes to Gambit, he's right now falling out from the sky. Now, at first, it does look like he's not going to survive, but of course, it's comics. Of course, our heroes are going to survive in some kind of crazy way. But the question is right now, what led into this moment? How in the world do we get the fact that Gambit is stolen from Muir Island and barely survived some kind of explosion and also fall on the ground pretty hard? And so when we do switch back over to the present day, we pick up with Storm and Gambit heading over to Muir Island. Now, I kind of like this a lot. And the reason why, because it's kind of a callback to the idea of how Gambit and Storm have a very close connection with one another, kind of like best friends or like brother and sister. And the reason why, because it was Storm who had begun the process of bringing Gambit into the world of the X-Men. And so we kind of get a small flashback of the idea of these two characters meeting and hanging out in the early days of their friendship. But they do arrive at Muir Island. When you do have the two characters arrive to Muir Island, we're kind of left to believe at first that the reason why you had Gambit go there with Storm is because, well, Moira McTaggart has been asking to study Gambit, to learn more about his powers. And so when it comes to Gambit, we have to remember that he now has these kinetic time delay bombs when it comes to his powers. And so she wants to know more about his abilities. Now, here's the thing. For Gambit, that's not the reason why he's truly here. But he can use that right now as an excuse for his real mission. But while you do have the three characters kind of hanging out for dinner, waiting for, the final results from Moira McTaggart's test on Gambit, you have Storm trying to tell them a story about her and Gambit in the past. Except out of nowhere, the power goes off completely. Now, of course, we already know that this was done by Gambit because he was sent here for an assignment. He was here to steal something from Moorman Taggart. But before we kind of learn what he came here to steal, we had to switch over to, well, the Executioner. And the reason why, because we pick up with Executioner trying to recruit three people, Mariah, Cosmo, and Jack. Now, all three characters, including Executioner, they were all working together in the last issue when it came for them being part of that convoy that was supposed to deliver something over to the Echelon Enterprise office building. But of course, their plan failed because of Gambit. And so because they failed being part of the security team, they all got fired. And so for Executioner, he wants to bring those three guys in, work with him to go after Gambit because what he did was completely wrong. But also he's wanted for murder. So when it comes to Executioner, that guy right there is a bad mutant that must be stopped. But now we pick up with another character, Tonti Maddie. Now for Tonti Maddie, she was someone who helped raise Gambit when he was a young boy, being there for him. But the problem is right now for Tonti Maddie, she's going through this dream of her being a young girl in 1891, being chased down by a mob. Now while being chased down by the mob, we kind of get the idea of her dreams being invaded by, of course, the same character from earlier, Fontanelle. Now for Fontanelle, it's her trying to investigate, but also have Maddie want to investigate as well, because apparently in this dream, it happened for real in the past in 1891, where she was a young girl being chased down by a mob, but she was saved by Gambit. Now that right there is a massive problem, because in 1891, Gambit was not alive, but somehow he appeared in the past as a grown man being able to protect her. And the question is now, how was he able to do that? But getting back over to the present day, we kind of learn here that for Moorman Taggart, she wanted to make sure that all her information that she had collected over the years did not fall into the wrong hands, into a character like Bastion or somebody else. And so what she did was, ever the case, the power does go out, the hard drives, they're all kept right now in some kind of system, will be shot into space to keep them away from Bastion. But the problem is right now, there is no Bastion. There is no bad guy. And so for Gambit, what he has to do is get into that rocket, get the hard drive, and bring it back over to Moorman Taggart. Now, he is able to pull it off because we saw that at the very beginning of this chapter. But the problem is that for Gambit, he also copies all the data on that hard drive for the new sun. That was his assignment. And so for Storm, she's kind of like, hey, dude, why you feel kind of sad? You were a big hero. He says, I'm tired. But in reality, it's him feeling bad about the idea of what he just did to Moorman Taggart. Introduce the two new characters, the Mingo brothers. Now, when it comes to Mingo brothers, we do learn here they killed somebody in Chicago, but they're about to make their way over to New York. And of course, that means the next chapter is going to involve Gambit dealing with the Mingo brothers. Now, as we transition into the next chapter, the last chapter for today's video, we do pick up with Gambit. Now, for Gambit, is him now beginning to kind of feel restless because he wants to know more information about the new son, the supposed person who went out of his way to save his life. And so you have Gambit begin to follow the courier around. Now, when it comes to Courier, we see him having a meeting with a group of people who are part of a crew known as the Asq. Now, as the meeting goes on for Gambit, he's listening in. Now, the Courier, he's really unable to get his pitch off because he wants to bring the crew into the fold for his boss, the new son. But while the meeting's going on, you then had his character Pelican walk into the room. Now, when it comes to Pelican, he's this guy who has this gas he wants to mass produce. Now, apparently the gas has the ability to just take over people, control them, and make them do whatever you want them to do. Now, every single person right now wants to know, is the gas securely contained? No, it's not. Matter of fact, the gas is released. And we also learn here that even though the gas is beginning the process of taking over people's minds, it also has some side effects, like, for example, melting your face. Now, every single person in the room right now has been affected except the courier. And the reason why, because for the courier, he has the ability to control every single cell in his body. Now, in later comics, his powers are fully explored in later stories. But either way, you didn't have the Mingo brothers walk into the room. Now, for the Mingo brothers, what they want to do is gather every single person in the room and also the courier. Now, you do have Gambit being able to go out of his way to save the courier, but he also grabbed a container that's containing the gas as well. Now, while you do have our two heroes leave, we then kind of switch over to a different setting. But now we pick up Fontanelle once again. Now, when we do, we see her diving into the mind of Sekhmet. Now, for Sekhmet, her dream is really more the idea of digging up relics that belongs to Apocalypse, but also confronting Ozymandias. We also see part of her dream being about the idea of Gambit saving her life, kind of continuing the idea of the possibility of her being another love interest for Gambit. But Fontanelle is her right now just gathering more information about Gambit. And really, the rest of this issue is really more of us just seeing Gambit trying to get away. And matter of fact, he does, but we see him run into another mutant, better known as Bill. Now, when it comes to Bill, he's homeless. He lives in Onslaught Alley. Now, the reason why it's called that, because, well, that was where Onslaught attacked the most at. But anyways, when it comes to Bill, he has this green energy that allows him to look into other realities. Like, for example, there's Havoc, who's right now in a different reality. Matter of fact, around his time in Marvel Comics, he had his own book, better known as Mutant X. But like I said though, for Gambit, the rest of this issue is him just trying to get away from the Mingo brothers, which he is able to do. Now, for the Mingo brothers, they do believe they have a container bag that also contains the gas. But in reality, all they have is a container. For Gambit, he got away with the gas, but knowing that their boss will sooner or later come after them and most likely bring him down. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over, well, the X-Men. And so today's video is going to be a tad bit short because we're only covering 2 more issues of Gambit, and then we kind of jump around to other X titles. Not a lot of different X titles because we're still in the late 1990s where you had Marvel kind of do all this reshuffling. So for example, we only had, I think, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, Wolverine, Cable, X-Man, and you also had Gambit. I want to say Excalibur, X-Factor were completely gone by this point, and X-Force was on the chopping blocks next. But when it comes to Gambit, he did have a small size of an ongoing series in the late 1990s going into the early 2000s. You didn't have Marvel do the whole like relaunch basically with Marvel Knights, Ultimate Marvel, and getting back on the board again. But anyways, when it comes to Gambit, we do see in this first chapter of today's video, he's gonna team up with Blade. And so as we get into the opening pages for today's storyline, we do pick up with a character known as Chai Colt. And I really hope I pronounce his name correctly, but he is a character who had recently turned into a vampire. Now, we see him currently in this one area in New Orleans where he's going after different children. Now, of course, with a vampire being around, you already know that means Blade has to be nearby. And of course, Blade does appear. Now, when it comes to Blade being there, Blade's main goal is to kill this vampire. But you didn't have the vampire throw the child what could be its actual death if Blade did not save the child before falling to its death. And so Blade realized, even though he didn't save the child's life, the vampire now had gotten away. Now, this leads us right over to, well, our good old boy, Gambit. And so now we see Gambit meet and go with 2 characters, Maddie and also Jean Luck. Now, Maddie is an older woman who helped take care of Gambit when he was a young boy. And when it comes to Jean, Jean is the adoptive father to Gambit. Now, with all that being said, it's Maddie right now trying to warn Gambit that there are 2 people who are currently trying to find him. one of them being the Fontanelle, and we had talked about her character in the last video. She has been entering the minds of different people who have some kind of connection to Gambit and hoping to find him. The other person would be the intercarry. And I know I just butchered how to pronounce that word correctly, but he is a character who goes out his way to collect children and different things. And matter of fact, in our last video, we had talked about the idea that he wanted Gambit when he was a baby. Now, apparently, he has been missing for a while, but his collection, his people are still out there because, again, he broke away from the Thieves Guild and formed his own clan. But now his people are being killed off. And so we didn't see Jean walk in with the young boy who was saved by Blade earlier. And so once you do have Gambit being able to get caught up to speed here, he's kind of like, cool, we got a vampire to find, kill off that vampire, but also find his young child's hero. So, Batman, of course, talking about Blade here, made a small joke about Batman and Jim Gordon in this issue, but either way, for Gambit, he's now on his way to find Blade. Now, for Gambit, he wants to make sure that the Assassin Guild does not have a part in what's happening right now across the city because this vampire, Cheat Colt, is part of, or was part of the Assassin Guild. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, the Assassin Guild was being led by Belladonna, Gambit's ex-wife. So, of course, when he does stop by there, he has to stay hidden because she will try to kill him because there is a lot of bad blood between those two characters. But you do have her right now having a meeting with two ministers who are part of the Thieves Guild because they're right now saying like, hey, your guy who was dead, now undead, is killing off some of our people right now. And that's not okay at all. Now, for Gambit, while listening in on this conversation, he can confirm that Belladonna and the assassins are not really helping out Cheat Colt. And the reason why, because Cheat Colt at first was not really a good assassin. For him, he always tried to study the history of the Assassin Guild, and that was really it. And so it did sound like he had officially left the assassins behind. And so that tells Gambit, okay, cool, right now my ex-wife is innocent. Let's go ahead and move on with our day. Now, out of nowhere, we do pick up with the Fontanelle once again, and this time she has entered the mind of somebody else, and that would be Carter Reiking. Now, Carter Reiking is a character known as Hazard, and we had saw this character in the early parts of our coverage over the X-Men. I want to say it was like X-Men issue number 12. I could be wrong. I want to say it's made by Jim Lee. Again, could be wrong. But when it comes to Hazard, his father and also Charles Xavier's father were both working on this top secret mutant research project back in the day. Now, for Hazard, he was unfortunately one of those Marvel characters that Marvel just never flushed out. And matter of fact, we have not seen him in a very long time in our coverage. He appears here because the only reason why he saw something that might help her gather information about Gambit and also Charles Xavier. And that's really it. He's gone again just like that. Now, we also see here that for the Executioner, we saw in our last video, this guy who goes after mutants who had done some kind of horrible crime. Well, he has now put together of different people who were just fired from the recent jobs while working with the Executioner. And so their main goal is to now go after Gambit. But first, they need bait. How can they get Gambit to come to them? Well, why not go ahead and kidnap Rogue? Kidnap her, and for sure, he'll come running to save her life. Now, getting back over to Gambit, we see him right now being able to find Blade. Now, of course, like classic Marvel, you have your two heroes fight against one another because for these two characters, they never met before. And so while you do have the two characters fighting against one another, you didn't have Gambit realize that Blade's a good person, and Blade also realized that our boy Gambit is also a good person. And so, of course, you have the two agree to work together. And the reason why, because for Blade, he wants to kill off this vampire, but for Gambit, he kind of has an idea of where Cheat Colt is going to head to next, to go after the true source of power of the Intercarry's collection. And I just butchered that word again. after I literally just Googled it. God dang. But either way, you have the two guys agree to work together. So you have Blade and Gambit head over to find the Antiquary. Now the problem is that he's currently missing. So when they head over to his museum, all they find is Tome and also Horde, two people left behind by him to watch over his collection at his museum. Now, his prize collection is locked away, and so when it comes to Vampire, it does seem like what he wants is the prize collection that is currently, again, locked away. And so you have Gambit offer to stop the vampire if him and Blade can get access to the prize collection. And here's the reason why you had Gambit and also kind of Blade offer that. And the reason why, because they realized that for Antiquary, he wanted information. The collection that Antiquary had were different items that possessed information about the past of different things. Like, for example, the idea of the Externals, a group of mutants who are basically immortal. And so when it comes to when it comes to Chai Colt, what he does next is he takes over the minds of all the different children that he has bitten. And those kids were able to easily overpower Tome and also Horde. And so with them being overpowered, he grabs the keys and now has access to Antiquary's main collection, his prize collection. Now, you do have Blade and our boy Gambit appear, and they do work together to defeat the vampire. But now we have to pick up with the Mingo brothers. Now, the Mingo brothers, we saw in our last video where they were trying to use this gas that has the ability to break people's will and be controlled by the person who had control over the gas. Now, for the Mingo brothers, they're working for a Russian mafia boss better known as the Pig. And so because they failed, because they had Gambit take the gas from them, you then have the Pig say, you now have a second chance to get the gas back. Technically, not get the gas back. I need you guys to go after the mutant that had escaped, a young boy known as Shiro. And when it comes to Shiro, his mutant ability allows him to produce the gas that the Pig was trying to use as a way to control people. So the Mingo brothers, they now have a second chance to please their boss, to bring the young boy back to him, who's currently right now with another character known as Zoe as they head into New Orleans. And so as we dive into Gambit issue number 5, we do pick up with the Executioner going out of his way to, well, bring down Gambit. Now, for him to officially do that, he has to go out of his way to kidnap Rogue, because for Rogue, he knows that Gambit loves her. And so if he does use her as bait, then most likely Gambit will come and try to save Rogue's life. And so we actually see one of the different people that the Executioner has brought onto his team go out of her way to ambush Rogue, and they teleport away just like that in a matter of seconds. Now, we're also kind of diving to the origin or the backstory for the Executioner character, because in the earlier issues of his appearances, we only got like small samples here and there, like, oop, here you go, oop, here you go. And that was really it. And so we kind of learn here that his entire family was a military family, like his dad, his grandfather, and the list goes on, right? Except his dad has supposedly died by friendly fire during a training session when he was 10 years old. Now, for Executioner, he always kind of believed in the idea that that was not the truth. And so he began to work for the FBI and kind of work his way up so that he could find a way to find more information about what exactly happened to his father. Now, we're not really told like what exactly happened to his father, but we kind of believe here that his dad did not die by the hands of friendly fire. But you didn't have the story move on, because for the Executioner, he has Rogue now, which means he now has his bait to bring Gambit over to him. Now, for Charles Xavier, he begins to lecture Gambit, because for Gambit, well, he got Rogue kidnapped. And so it's the idea of Charles saying like, okay, you're back on the X-Men now. Like, we all now know that you had a hand when it came to the mutant massacre that killed off a lot of Morlocks. We all know that. But it's the idea that you didn't tell us. And so your goal right now is to kind of, I don't know, try to rebuild your connections with the different members of the X-Men who at first did trust you, but then you broke that trust by not telling us the things about your past, like the mutant massacre. Because now it's Charles saying, you ran into the executioner. You should have told us. Now, for Gambit, he says, dude, we have a lot on our plate right now. So for me personally, I thought me seeing that guy was on the low part of our list of things to handle. But now I know it's kind of serious because he has Rogue. Now, for the executioner, he wants to make sure that it's only Gambit coming to him because the rest of the X-Men will make the battle pretty hard for him to win if the entire X-Men come to save Rogue. And so he made sure the teleporter that he left behind for Gambit will only teleport Gambit over to him. But now we pick up with Fontanelle. Now, for Fontanelle, remember, she's trying to gather information about Gambit, but also she has been hired by the new Sun. Now, the new Sun is a character we have been hearing about, but have not officially seen yet. Somebody who has gone out of his way to save Gambit's life when he was left behind by Rogue in the X-Men back in Antarctica when they had found out that he had a hand in the mutant massacre. And so when she tries to read the mind of the new Sun, he kicks her out of his mind just like that. And so this kind of leads into us seeing Gambit get back to work when it comes to saving Rogue's life, because now we see him arrive at the base that belongs to the Executioner. Now, when he does arrive there, of course, he's attacked by the different guys the Executioner has brought on and is trying to use against Gambit. Now, for Gambit, the dude is able to hold his own against these opponents very easily, but now it's come time for him to go one-on-one with the Executioner to hopefully save Rogue's life. This issue, it's really more of us seeing Gambit fight against the Executioner. And technically, he does not really try to fight against him. His main goal at the moment right now is to try to save Rogue's life. The problem is that for the Executioner, he made sure to set up a trap that will stop Gambit from getting to Rogue. And so when that trap worked, it now looks like the Executioner will finally get what he wants to bring down the Gambit. I don't know why I said the Gambit for. But anyways, you did have Rogue being able to break free. Now, when she breaks free, it's the idea that for Rogue, she hates to see the man she loves about to get attacked or killed off by the Executioner, so now she's able to break free and help fight against him. Now, the battle does end when you do have Gambit being able to cause a small explosion to send the Executioner far away from Rogue and also Gambit to allow them a chance to get the heck out of his base. Now, before the book does end, we learn here that for his father, the Executioner, that his father did not die by the hands of friendly fire. His father was killed off by his lieutenant. And the reason why, because his father had killed off one of his own men for not following orders. So his father was not an honorable man, a great man. He was a lie. But either way, though, you do have Gambit and also, well, Rogue being able to give back over to the X-Men. And so that kind of wraps up this issue right here in today's video. Now, it might take us a tad bit of a while to get back into Gambit storylines. And the reason why, because we got to cover a few more other X titles. But either way, okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men, right? And so we're going to pick up with some more Gambit. But here's the thing, because when it comes to Gambit, we're on issue number 6, and we're going to cover issues number 6 and 7 only in this video. And here's the reason why, because issue number 8 is technically part of a small X-Men crossover, better known as The Shattering. And The Shattering is a storyline that was done by Alan Davis mainly, but also a few other writers as well. But it was a small crossover. So I kind of want to go ahead and sit down and cover these two issues before we officially dive into the idea of The Shattering. And so getting into Gambit issue number 6. Now, for issue number 6, it's really more of the idea of us exploring How does Gambit know the pig? Now, we don't know really much about the pig just yet, but it's the idea the pig kind of knows Gambit. And so, in the first few pages of the storyline, we're kind of given a flashback. Now, with this flashback, we're kind of dealing with the idea of seeing Gambit right now as a young boy, but also with another character, and now it'd be Etienne. And I really hope I pronounced that correctly. There was a football player the same name, and I was kind of like, maybe, just maybe, it's pronounced like that. Now, when it comes to Etienne, his main goal at the moment is the idea of trying to join the Thieves Guild. Of course, the same kind of guild that Gambit is a part of. Now, for Gambit, he is only supposed to watch over Etienne as Etienne tries to finish the actual task that was given to him. The problem is that who they had stole from is now trying to, well, stop them. Now, we also learn here that for Etienne, he definitely knows about Gambit's powers. Now, for Gambit, even though he has been practicing with his powers, at this point in time, he's still not really able to control his abilities just yet. And so he's kind of scared of the idea of trying to use his powers in this kind of situation, especially because he's only supposed to watch over Etienne, not really get involved. We also kind of learned here that when it came to Etienne, he had stole from Kendra. Now, we had talked about her character a lot in the past when it came to our coverage over the X-Men. The idea that for Kendra, she is an external. Now, externals are a group of mutants that have the ability of immortality. And so when it comes to Kendra, she's been around a few times in earlier storylines that we had officially done for, well, X-Men comics. But for the idea of Gambit, we had learned a long time ago that him and her are kind of like past lovers, but not at this point in time because one, he's a young boy, and also two, it's just wrong completely. Anyways, though, when it comes to Gambit and also for Etienne, they are literally captured by Kendra and her forces. But for her people, they're kind of wondering like, why in the world did you want these two young boys for? Now, for Kendra, we're kind of told here that in the future, really, she is told that in the future, her and Gambit are going to meet. And technically, we already know that because when it came to Gambit's first solo series, we had saw the idea that he knew Kendra. And again, there were some kind of lovers in the past. But anyways, when it comes to Kendra, what she does next is take Gambit and also take Etienne over to the pig. Now, when it comes to the pig, he's technically a mutant. But when it comes to the pig, he deals in human trafficking. You see, his main goal is to train young kids and turn them into soldiers. And then, well, sell them off to different people. Like, for example, the idea of Madam Hydra. Now, we see Madam Hydra right now about to get ready to, by some children. Now, again, for Gambit, around this time, even though he did know about his abilities, he's not really good with them. But for Gambit, he realized they have to get the heck out of there. And so we see Gambit right now trying to use his powers as a way to escape from the pig's facility. But now we had to switch over to the present day. Now, when we do learn that Thieves Guild was officially attacked by the pig. Here's the reason why. Because for the pig, he wanted a young boy who's a mutant. Now, for the Thieves Guild, they had taken in two people from the Tokyo Thieves Guild as a way to hide them from the pig. And here's the reason why. Because the two young people are Zoe, and I'm going to literally mispronounce her name, is Hishihara, and also her younger brother as well, Shiro. Now, we also kind of saw Shiro in the earlier parts of our coverage over Gambit, but it's also the idea that for Shiro, he has the mutant ability to release a gas that could technically kind of force people under someone else's control. And we saw that in an earlier storyline because for the pig, what he wanted to do was use that gas on different people and force people to do different things that he wanted done. And so for Gambit, he already knows about the gas, but now he knows the gas comes from that young boy who was just possibly kidnapped from the pig and also his sister. And so for Gambit, his main goal is to hopefully find the young boy. Now, out of nowhere, we kind of switched over to another character known as Kimberly Purcell. Now, for Kimberly Purcell, she's not really important for the overall story of Gambit. It's really more her sister because we have been seeing her sister right now in the earlier parts of our coverage over the X-Men, kind of giving us the idea that Kimberly's sister, Mary, is right now inside the body of Gambit. But for Kimberly, while having this dream, she's confronted by the Fontanelle. Now, the Fontanelle is this random lady who has been trying her best to collect information about Gambit and also the person he's currently working for. But it's her right now telling Kimberly, like, your sister is not dead. That matter of fact, she is alive. And so sooner or later, she has to make a decision to leave the person right now she's inside or have to kill him. But I kind of want to go ahead and get back into the flashback. And the reason why, because we left off with the idea of Gambit and Etienne trying to escape from the pig, right? Now, we also see in this same flashback that for Gambit and also Etienne, they really did try their best to escape. And it did seem like at first they were going to escape. The problem was that while you had Gambit and Etienne trying to escape, the pig kind of hit them out of the building as everything was falling apart inside the facility. But on their way down to the body of water, Gambit hit his head. Now for Gambit, he did wake up, but luckily he kind of fell onto this piece of wood that kept him afloat. But 3 weeks later, they found the body Etienne, and for Gambit, of course, being the one who knew Etienne, he had to identify the dead body. So Etienne died just like that. Etienne was not really able to officially pass his task to join into the Thieves Guild. Now, the rest of this chapter right here really does kind of wrap up with the idea of Gambit being able to find Zoe, who's also trying to protect her younger brother, Shiro. Now, when it comes to Gambit and our, well, two other characters, we see them also being confronted by the Mingo brothers. Now, for the Mingo brothers, we met them in an earlier storyline. Again, they're not like super important for the whole idea of Gambit, but it's still the idea like, hey, guys, they're also working for the pig. So they're part of this storyline. And so you have the Mingo brothers really being able to knock out Gambit, Zoe, and also Shiro. And the problem is now all three characters are about to be handed over to the pig. Now for the pig, he knows about Gambit, but also now he has his hands on Shiro. And for the pig, he loves the idea of using Shiro's gas to control other people. And so this leads into the next chapter. But as we get into issue number 7, we're really picking up with the idea of the pig truly believing that with him now having Shiro, he should have the ability to slowly have the chance to take over the entire world, to do things that other people weren't really able to do, like Doctor Doom or Magneto or even like the Red Scroll, for example. And so it's the pig truly believing that he has the chance to officially take over the world, because again, with Shiro's mutant ability, with releasing that gas allows someone to control the willpower of the person who was affected by the gas. And so for, well, the pig, he feels like this right now is his best chance to achieve that goal. But now we switch over to Zoe and also Gambit. Now for those two characters, they're also prisoners, but it's also the idea of like Gambit knows that for the pig, for him to kind of get control over you without the gas, he needs knowledge of different things in your life. So what can you do to make sure that he will not have the ability to have something over you? Don't share anything about your life or something else he wants to know about. And so even though you do have the Mingo brothers literally beating down on Gambit and also Zoe, is Gambit right now making sure, and also Zoe as well, to not really share that much information to Pig or the Mingo brothers. Now we do pick up with Gambit's adoptive father, Gene. Now when it comes to Gene, he's very worried about the idea of his son, Gambit. Now it's also kind of Gene hinting at the idea that something bigger is coming down the road for Gambit, but we're kind of left to wonder what in the world that could possibly be. But now we do switch over to the Fontanelle. Now, for the Fontanelle, it's really more the idea that she's still going into the minds of different people to collect information about Gambit. Now, this time, we see her collecting information about Scalp Hunter, or from Scalp Hunter. Now, Scalp Hunter was part of the Marauders, right? And so when it comes to the Marauders, well, they had a hand, really, they were responsible for the idea of the Mutant Massacre storyline, where they had killed off a bunch of Morlocks. Now, we had just learned not too long ago that for Gambit, he also had a part in that as well too, but not really knowing why Mr. Sinister had sent him and the Marauders into the tunnels of the Morlocks. But we also learn here that for Fontanelle, she's also, kind of working with the New Sun. Now, the New Sun is this mysterious character that has saved Gambit in a prior storyline, but also kind of giving him different tasks as well. But it's also New Sun wanting to know more about Gambit. Now, the rest of this issue, it's really more the idea of us seeing Gambit and also Zoe kind of working together to bring down the whole facility, but to also stop Pig as well. Because once you do have Zoe get taken away by the Mingo, or really a soldier, to one of the many people that works for the Pig, once she's able to escape and cause a lot of explosion in the entire facility, that allows Gambit to also escape. Now, for Gambit, he does tell Zoe, go ahead and get all the different kids that the Pig had collected and was basically part of his human trafficking scheme, while he go do a Pig and hopefully save Shiro as well. Now, when it comes to Gambit, it's also him wanting to kind of finally get revenge against the Pig. And the reason why, because let's not forget, in the first chapter, in that flashback, we had learned that for Gambit, he was watching over Etienne, a close cousin of his, but also who was going through a trial for the Thieves Guild, who was killed off technically thanks to the Pig. And so for Gambit right now, it's him saying like, yeah, I'm going to save Shiro, but I also go out of my way to make sure the Pig pays for what he did to my cousin Etienne. And so we see the battle go on, right? But the battle does truly end once you do have Gambit being able to use the same kind of gas that Shiro basically produces on the Pig. And so once that happens, the Pig is now officially under Gambit's control. And so you didn't have Gambit tell the Pig, walk off the edge. And of course he does. And so we're kind of left to believe in the possibility that he is dead. Now, technically, it does kind of seem like he is dead, because if I remember correctly, Marvel does not bring this character back at all in any future books down the road. And so it's kind of like, yeah, the Pig is officially dead. But you also have Gambit being able to find Shiro and being able to reunite him with Zoe. And the day is saved, just like that. And so with that being said, okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to pick up with X-Men The Shattering Part 2. Now, here's the thing, because X-Men The Shattering, like I said in the last video, is kind of like a small event that a lot of X-Men fans kind of forgotten about, because it's really more a prelude that leads into Apocalypse the 12. And so I kind of feel like some folks do forget about this event. But hey, you know what? It's okay, because honestly, I forget a lot of things. But anyways, when it comes to X-Men The Shattering, it's about the idea that you have Charles Xavier no longer having trust in his X-Men. So we're now seeing the X-Men completely disbanded. Now, for me personally, if I was back in the 1990s when this came out, I would truly believe that it was Marvel trying to hint at the idea of a possible another Onslaught event. But it's kind of like, no, it's not. It's going in a different direction, because with Charles Xavier no longer trusting his X-Men, disbanding the X-Men so he can make his own new team of X-Men, you have all our usual characters going in different ways in different books. And so now we're getting different storylines, like Uncanny X-Men, or X-Men, are like Gambit, and also Astonishing X-Men. So 4 different books being told right now to kind of give us the idea of like what's going to happen to the characters now with the X-Men being officially disbanded. Now, the next storyline we're going to cover in this video is the idea of Gambit, because for Gambit, he had his own solo book. And I kind of love the idea of Marvel saying like, you know what, let's go ahead and do a storyline where it's Gambit right now
on his own. That ties into the shattering, the idea of the X-Men right now being disbanded. Now, I kind of feel like for Marvel, they kind of did drop the ball when it comes to like Wolverine or like even Cable, because they still had their own solo books as well. Like for me, you could have done a Wolverine storyline as well when it came to the Shattering event, or even Cable. Heck, even X-Man, who has his own actual book as well. But you know what? I'm still happy for Gambit. But with the idea of the team now being disbanded,
But as we're getting into the opening pages of the storyline, we do learn very quickly here that for Gambit, it's him right now breaking into the school of Charles Xavier. Here's the reason why, because it's really more of Gambit right now trying to figure out like, why would Charles go out of his way to disband the X-Men? Now, when it comes to Gambit, he is able to discover what could be the possible reason. The idea that Charles had lost his trust in the X-Men, that somebody on the team that Charles kind of feels like might betray him. Now, here's the thing, because for Gambit, at this point in time, he's that one person they truly can't trust. And the reason why, because for Gambit, he was the guy at a hand in the mutant massacre that took place back in the 1980s, where you had marauders killing off the Morlocks. And so, for most of the X-Men, when they found out for Gambit, he was kind of put on that list of keep an eye on that guy right there because he really can't be trusted all the way. But now we see here that for Gambit, he wants to help the X-Men out and kind of figure out like who's the person that Charles truly believes that could betray them. Now, for Gambit, we also see him heading over to meet Claire Deluc. Now, for Claire, she's not really an overall important character. Matter of fact, I want to say she only appears like 2 or 3 times in Marvel Comics. And one of the times she does appear is Uncanny X-Men, like a while ago. And so, either way, it's Gambit right now trying to use her to find somebody else. Someone better known as Scalp Hunter. Now, Scalp Hunter is part of the Marauders. And so it's Gambit right now saying, I need to find him, especially like right now. But this kind of leads into, well, it leads to Gambit having a dream. Now, while having this dream, he's then confronted by the Fontanelle. Now, this is a character that we had officially talked about in the earlier videos of Gambit. The idea that she's kind of working for the new sun, but she has been going into other people's dreams and collecting information about Gambit. And so, like right now, she's in his mind right now, trying to gather more things about him. Now, really, she's not really able to get that clear picture of Gambit, but it's really more the idea that she wants him to kind of think of a few different things like, who are we? How we come this way? Why are we here? And where are we going? Like, go ahead and think about all those different things about yourself so that she'll then be able to learn more things about him. But once you do have Gambit wake up, he's then confronted by the courier. Now, the courier is this guy who just, well, like his name says, he's a courier. And he works for the new sun as well. And his courier right now telling Gambit, like, hey, the new sun wants to finally meet you. Now, guys, remember, we don't know really much about the new sun yet. All we know is the guy has supposedly saved Gambit's life not too long ago and has been kind of working for the new sun as a way to pay him back. Now, the reason why you have the new son meeting up with Gambit is the idea that for the new son, he kind of want to explain some things to Gambit about the idea of like something major is about to happen down the road. Now, he also kind of brings up the idea that there have been different moments in time, key moments in time that have truly affected the timeline that our heroes currently live in, like the idea of Jean Grey turning into the Phoenix, or the Mcron Crystal, or the idea of Cyclops, giving up Cable, who then went into the future. And so it's him saying like something big is coming down the road. The idea of Apocalypse is going to bring in some kind of battle against the X-Men. Now, of course, as you all know, the Shattering is just more of a prelude that leads into the next crossover. Now, when it comes to Gambit, when he does get back over to his motel, he does find that Courier has been knocked out. Now, it's the idea that Courier was attacked by Scalp Hunter. Now, when it comes to Gambit, he kind of realized that Scout Hunter is not really trying to kill off Gambit. That in reality, it's kind of like him wanting to put down Gambit to kind of figure out why in the world Gambit was looking for him. Now, once you do have our boy being able to stop Scout Hunter, it's now Gambit saying like, dude, listen, the reason why I came to you right now is because I'm looking for Mr. Sinister. But it's also him saying like, listen, I understand that you might have the info that I'm looking for to where to find Mr. Sinister. Now, for Scout Hunter, he does remind us one thing. As Marauders have been constantly cloned over time in Marvel Comics by Mr. Sinister. And that includes one other person we're going to see here in a moment. But it's Scout Hunter saying, like, dude, we have been cloned so many times that we technically do not remember like where are his actual bases across the world or where you could possibly find Mr. Sinister. One person might know. And so this kind of leads into a confusing part of the storyline, and let me explain. You see, when it comes to Sabretooth, around this time in Marvel Comics, he did have adamantium added into his body. Now, it was taken away. I'm not going to tell you by who, because that storyline does take place in Wolverine issue number 145. And I was kind of told, like, hey, don't cover that issue until like later on, like after you do X-Men The Shattering. So for right now, we're technically not there yet. But it's the idea that when he came to Sabretooth, he had lost the adamantium and really he's on the verge of death, it seems like. Like his healing factor is not really being able to heal him up at the moment. And so it's Gambit right now coming to him because he's the one Marauder who might actually know where Mr. Sinister base could be at, and hopefully for Gambit find Mr. Sinister to get information out of him. Now, for Sabretooth, it's kind of like, why in the world should I help you? And it's Gambit saying, because I'm going to help you survive. Now, the way Gambit is going to do that is really more the idea of Gambit saying, like, hey, listen, I can help you survive by also helping me find Mr. Sinister. Basically saying, like, if you help me find Mr. Sinister, he can help me find out what's going on with Charles Xavier, but also find a way to kick your healing factor back in to keep your butt alive. So why not go ahead and take care of me? Now, for Sabretooth, he was staying with this tribe, but I'm not really going to dive too deep into the actual tribe. But either way, you do have Sabretooth agree to help out Gambit and also Courier, because Courier got dragged along by Gambit to hopefully find Mr. Sinister's base. And so this kind of leads into the idea of us seeing Gambit, Sabretooth, and Courier head over to one of the bases that do belong to Mr. Sinister. Now, we're going to kind of stop this part on a cliffhanger, not the actual video, but like this part of the video. Because once you do have our three heroes get inside, they do find a few things. Like, for example, the idea of different testing tubes that do create the different clones of the different members of the Marauders. But they also find three Marauders right now being assigned to get rid of, well, Gambit, Courier, and also Sabretooth. And matter of fact, for Courier, he does get shot in the head, but it's Harpoon, it's Riptide, and also Scalp Hunter, who were assigned by, most likely, Mr. Sinister to bring down Sabretooth, Gambit, and, well, they seem like they already took out Courier. But we do get another interlude like we always do in every single issue of this series, and we do pick up with the Fontanelle. Now, when it comes to her, we see her now in the dreams of the Tide Collector. Now, for this character, he does kind of reappear a few times, but really only in stories involving Gambit because his connection to Kendra and also the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild as well. But when it comes to Fontanelle, she wants to know what kind of deal was done with Kane and Gambit and also Kendra, but also the idea that for the Tide Collector, he saw Gambit 100 years ago. Now, we kind of got the hint that there's going to be a storyline down the road to explain why in the world that our boy Gambit was in the past 100 years in the past. Now, getting back over to the battle, we do learn that when it comes to Courier, he did survive because, well, Courier has the ability to control every single cell in his body. But when it comes to Gambit, he was able to take down all three members of the Marauders. Now, after doing that, it's now the idea of, Gambit kind of wondering what to do next because for him and Scalp Hunter, they go way back, right? And so to see the idea of Scout Hunter being used over and over again by Mr. Sinister just really does bother Gambit a lot. Now, when it comes to Gambit, he wants to find where all the different clone bodies are being kept at and want to destroy the clone bodies to allow Scout Hunter the chance to finally, well, rest. But then you have Gambit be confronted by Mr. Sinister. And so this kind of leads into the ending of the storyline, where it's really more of us now kind of seeing Gambit have a conversation with Mr. Sinister. And so with this conversation is the idea that it's Gambit saying like, hey, look, I need you to help me out here. Like, I need to figure out what's going on with Charles Xavier because the dude does truly believe that there's somebody on the X-Men right now who could possibly be a traitor. And I want to figure out who that traitor could possibly be. But also, like, I want you to help out, Sabretooth. Now, for Mr. Sinister, he does agree. But of course, for Sinister, he got to make a deal, right? He's like, I got an idea because I know what happened to Sabretooth. I can tell which person had drained the adamantium out of his body. So yeah, I can give him a little dose of a healing factor, and that should possibly help him recover. And also I had a device that can help you figure out what's going on with your boy Charles. But here's the catch. See, I can do those things for you if you give me Sabretooth. Now, when it comes to Gambit, he already knows that's a bad idea. And so he gives a different idea. Why don't I give you a part of a mutant that has the ability to control every single cell of his body, which means giving a part of Courier over to Mr. Sinister to play with, to kind of learn Courier's genetics. And so for Mr. Sinister, that's the perfect deal. He says yes, just like that. And so you have Gambit cut off a finger of Courier. Now again, for Courier, he has the ability to control every single cell in his body. So he can easily regrow his lost finger. But now for Gambit, he has a device that could possibly help him figure out what's going on with Charles, but also helped out Sabretooth as well. And so so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, it's time for us to go ahead and get back into some more Gambit. Now, here's the thing, because this does take place post X-Men The Shattering. In today's video, I want to sit down and cover Gambit issue number 10, but also the annual that came out in 1999. I don't know why I had a hard time saying that. I was truly struggling there. But when it comes to issue number 10, can I just say I really did enjoy this issue a lot. I don't know why. Something about this issue is kind of like, okay, it's pulling me in. And usually when I read comics, I read like 4 to 5 pages, take a small break, come back, read 5 more pages, take a small break. No. It's one of those issues where I sat down and read the entire thing in one sitting, which honestly is rare for me because I'm always doing something around the house left and right. But when it comes to issue number 10, we actually pick up in the past first. And the reason why, because we pick up with Baron von Strucker. Now, as we all know, when it comes to Baron von Strucker, he'll become a very important villain for Captain America. But also, he has twin kids in the far future who are better known as the Strucker twins. Now, for Baron von Strucker, we see him right now as a young boy, a young boy, back in World War I. Now, while he's running around in Germany, he runs into this jewel. Now, the jewel took a name. It's better known as Momentary Princess. Now, this random jewel only appears every like 27, 28 years. It only appears for a few minutes, then disappears just like that. But usually, when someone sees the jewels, they get all of these different kinds of visions. premonitions of things that happen in the future or things that happen in the past. And so for Baron von Strucker, right now he's seeing his supposed future. But now we got to pick up with Nick Fury in the Howling Commandos in World War II. Now you're probably wondering like, okay, how in the world is Nick Fury in World War II but still young in the present day? Easy, 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 easy. It's a thing called the Infinity Formula. Now each member of the Howling Commandos were kind of given that formula, kind of help slow down their aging process, also kind of gave them a small healing factor as well. And so when it comes to Nick Fury in World War II, he was around with the Howling Commandos, but also he was on a mission to find the same jewel that Baron von Strucker saw in the past, better known as the Momentary Princess. And so when it comes to Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos, they also brought in another member, Jean-Luc LeBeau, better known as the father to Gambit. So we get the idea that back in World War II, he was also sent to help out the Howling Commandos on different missions across the world. Like, for example, right now, to steal the item that was solved back in World War I, the Momentary Princess. Now, as we get over to the present day, we do pick up with Gambit, who was assigned to go over to Germany to hopefully locate and grab the Momentary Princess, like his father tried to do back in World War II, but also like how Baron von Strucker tried to do back in World War I. Now, for Gambit, when he does arrive at a location where the jewel might pop up at, we kind of find out that he is not the only one. You also have Sekhmet Conaway there as well, but also the Von Strucker twins, different characters who are also trying their best to get their hands on the jewel. Now remember guys, the jewel only reappears every like 28, 29 years, but only for a few minutes. And so all four characters, they only have a short period of time to hopefully find the jewel, grab the jewel, and then leave with it. Now, in every single issue of Gambit, we're always kind of given these interludes. Now, these interludes, they're really used to kind of focus on different characters around Gambit. Like, for example, the idea of Courier. Now, for Courier, he's always known doing like different assignments for different people in Marvel Comics. But right now, he's currently working for a character known as, well, the New Sun. Now, the New Sun, we don't know much about his character just yet. All we know is that for Gambit, he has also been working for the New Sun as well, but also the New Sun was the guy who saved Gambit right after the trial of the Gambit storyline, where you had the X-Men discover that for Gambit, he had a hand in the mutant massacre and they left him behind in Antarctica. Now, when it came to Gambit, he has been helping out the New Sun, so has Courier. But right now we see Courier delivering another package, except this package is a tad bit different because two people, better known as Quiet Bill and Huey. But now we are given another interlude. Now this one's a tad bit different because now we're focusing on the Fontanelle. Now she is a character that has been popping up left and right in our coverage over Gambit. And when it comes to the Fontanelle, what she is trying to do is collect information about Gambit by going to the minds of different people who are close to Gambit, kind of going to their dreams. And so right now, she's in the mind of Angel. But here's the reason why, because let's not forget, the X-Men had discovered that Gambit had a hand in the mutant massacre. In that crossover, Angel got severely injured to the point where he had to lose his wings. He found Apocalypse, who then turned him into Archangel. And so it's the Fontanelle right now saying, I believe that you right now hate Gambit. And the reason why, because he is the man who is responsible for your whole entire life going in a completely different direction. But now we have to get back into the flashback for, Jean LeBeau, the father to Gambit, because we got to figure out, how did he lose the jewel? Because in World War II, he was assigned to get his hands on the jewel, right? And so we kind of find out that he was able to get his hands on the jewel, but he ran into Baron von Strucker and also Kandra. Now, we had talked a lot about Kandra. When it comes to Kandra, well, she is better known as an external. Externals are a group of mutants that are, well, they have the ability of immortality. And so when it comes to Kendra, she is one of them. Now, she does have other abilities as well, but for Kendra, when it comes to her, she's also kind of in charge of the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to go into the whole idea of like the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild, but just know like she is the middleman between two parties. But she's saying right now, if you hand the jewel over to me, I'll make sure all the favors go to your guild rather than to the Assassin Guild. Now, the Howling Commandos do appear, and they're kind of like, don't do it, because if you give it to her, it's kind of like handing that powerful item over to Hitler. Now, luckily for everyone, the jewel does once again disappear, and of course, reappears 28 years later for Gambit to find out. Not really find out about it, really more just to locate it. Except when he does locate it, it does seem like for Gambit, he'll be the one to leave with it, but also to touch it and kind of learn different things about it. The future, the past for himself and other people around him. The problem is that you have Conaway and the twins reappear. And so this leads into a small battle between all the different characters. And the battle ends with the jewel disappearing just like that, because again, it only reappears for a few minutes every 28 years. And so now for all characters, they have to wait another 28 years for the jewel to reappear back in their reality, back in their time, back in this location. Now, we do learn the year 2028, apparently for Gambit and also Rogue, they were able to get their hands on the jewel finally. So it's kind of cool. Also, we learn here, they got married in the future. But hey, you know what? Either way, they got their hands on the jewel. That was epilogue 1. But now we have to jump over to 2084 for the last epilogue of this chapter, and we now pick up with the Witness. Now, the Witness is somewhat important, and the reason why, because 2084 is supposedly the future where Bishop comes from, and we have heard about the Witness before. It's the idea of the Witness being possibly an X-Men who has saw the downfall of the X-Men in the past. Could also be the reason why the X-Men had disappeared in the past. But also, it's us kind of seeing that the Witness could have been Gambit the entire time. We also learn here that for the Witness, what he has been doing is sending the jewel back in time over and over again and watching different people in the past like himself and Baron von Strucker going out of their way to get their hands on the jewel. But now we have to transition over to Gambit Annual 1999. Now with this annual, we're still focusing on Gambit, right? But also kind of getting some answers about a different character we met a while ago when it came to Uncanny X-Men. You see what I mean here in a moment. Because when it comes to Gambit, we pick on him right now in the opening pages of this chapter in the Danger Room as he's training alongside with Marrow. Now, as they're training with one another, one of her bones goes through him. Now, he's not bleeding out. And matter of fact, he's not even in serious pain. And so when it comes to Gambit, he's then able to pull the bone out of his body. Now the bone, it's glowing green, but then he throws it away and it blows up. And so at first, we're kind of left to believe that the reason why the bone blew up is because of his powers. But there's a tad bit more to that. Now for Charles Xavier, the dude wants some answers. Now let's not forget that this storyline does take place after X-Men The Shattering. And remember guys, when it came to X-Men The Shattering, that whole storyline right there was really more Charles Xavier no longer trusting the X-Men because he realized that somebody on the team was not really that person. And matter of fact, it was Wolverine. Come to find out, it was a Skrull. And so when it comes to, Charles right now, he's still on edge at the moment. But it's right now our boy Gambit here, not really trying to give Charles any kind of help at all to figure out what's going on with Gambit's powers and why that bone did not kill him. Now, when it comes to Rogue, she overheard from Marrow about what exactly happened to Gambit. Now, here's the thing, because for Rogue and Gambit, they're still in love with one another. And so it's her kind of hoping that he would open up to her. But for Gambit, he still kind of keeps her at arm distance. And so for Rogue, unfortunately, she's not really able to get anything out of him. But then after that, you didn't have Charles go over to Gambit's boathouse. I was given to him by Jean Grey and Cyclops. Now, when it comes to Charles, the dude wants some answers. He's kind of like, all right, Gambit, I need to know, like, what in the world is going on with you? Because there seems to be something going on with you you're not telling us. Now, we also learn here that for Charles, he's not really able to access the mind of Gambit because the kinetic energy that Gambit puts out kind of makes it hard for Charles to read Gambit's mind. Now, he still could, but it will be very stressful and painful for both parties. But it's Charles saying, like, no, we're going to the lab, going to run some tests on you. And matter of fact, I already called Mormon Taggart. She's on FaceTime. Let's go right now. So you do have Charles and Gambit head over to the lab. You also have Rogue and Marrow there and Mormon Taggart on FaceTime call. Now, when it comes to Mormon Taggart, she does remind us that in an earlier issue of Gambit, she ran some scans on him. The thing was, she didn't find anything when it came to Gambit. But now it seems like with the new scans, she's now seeing this other being that's right now trapped inside the body of Gambit. Now, when it comes to Rogue, she kind of gives us a callback to an earlier issue of Uncanny X-Men where she saw him, Gambit, fighting alongside her, but also saw this green smoke around him, the same color as the Bone was looking when it came to Gambit in the earlier parts of the storyline. And so it's Charles kind of wondering what in the world is going on here. Now, it's also them saying like, okay, it does seem like he's hiding something from us. Is it to protect him or to protect us? But when it comes to Charles and also Mormon Taggart, they realize that when it comes to Gambit, his powers are now being kind of forced in a certain direction. Like his powers are being overcharged or evolving in a way where it's not organic. It's being forced to evolve in a certain kind of way, thanks to this other being. And so when it comes to Mormon Taggart and also Charles, they're trying to push back where that being is trying to push to. And of course, for Gambit, he begins to freak out. Now, it's not because like he no longer trusts Rogue, Marrow, Charles, and Mormon Taggart. It does seem like this other being right now is kind of controlling the body of Gambit and also attacking the fellow people in the room as well. And so when you have, Charles, Marrow, and Rogue wake up, Gambit is gone, and I'm kind of wondering where in the world did he go to? Now, once you do have Gambit wake up, you realize that he's no longer in New York. As a matter of fact, he wakes up in Manhattan, but Manhattan, Indiana. Now, when he looks outside the window, what he sees at the moment is flashes of someone else's life, not his, of course. And so he's kind of like, what in the world? Who is this person's past I'm seeing currently at the moment? Now, getting back over to school of Charles Xavier, we do pick up with Beast arriving. When Beast does arrive, it's the idea of Beast wondering what in the world happened to, Rogue, Marrow, and Charles Xavier. Now, you do have the team kind of catch Beast up, but they also kind of realize they got to find some answers. They got to find some clues, right? And so they have to head back over to Antarctica because they believe it all began there. Again, a call back to the trial of Gambit. And so when it came to Rogue, Marrow, Beast, and Charles, got in that jet and they flew off just like that. Now, when it comes to Gambit, I'm going to tell you right now, this other being right now inside of him is better known as Mary Purcell. Now, when it comes to Gambit, he wants to learn more about her. And so what he does, he heads over to a nearby library where he does learn that for Mary Purcell, she had died in a car explosion. Now, we also see him head over to the police department and being able to access a police department computer to kind of get more information about Mary Purcell, kind of get a better idea of who in the world is she or was she. Now, when it comes to Gambit, what he does discover here is that for Mary Purcell, that her parents had divorced. Now, her dad couldn't deal with the idea of his daughter and her problems. And the reason why, because she kept going to the hospital over and over again at a young age. Now, of course, it was the idea that her powers began to slowly manifest. But for her father and mother, they had no idea. And for her father, he got tired of her problems, quotation mark there. And so he divorced the wife and left. Now, he died shortly after from being a drunk, but also she died. And so once she had died, the coroner and the police officers, they had a hard time kind of labeling what was the cause of death here. Now, when he came to Gambit, he realized that the reason why the car exploded is because, well, her powers had manifested. Now, I want to go ahead and get back over to the X-Men, right? Because they do head over to Antarctica, right? And they head over to the base of Magneto. Because when it came to the trial of Gambit, the whole storyline took place there. It was where the X-Men had left Gambit at. And so when they do get inside, they find a few things. Like, for example, a tape recorder. Now, that tape recorder is basically the diary of Gambit, his journal, because he truly did believe that he was going to die there. He had no way out. He had no food, barely any clothes on his back. And so he kind of felt like it was going to be his end. And so you have the different members of the X-Men right now listening to that tape. Now, when it came to Gambit and also the X-Men in that storyline, while being at Magneto's base, they ran into Eric the Red. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain who Eric the Red is because it's somewhat confusing because there have been different people who had taken up that mantle. But in that storyline, we believed it was somebody else completely. Well, in this chapter right here, we kind of find out it was Magneto. Let me explain. Because when it came to Magneto, he had disappeared for a good while in Marvel Comics, then reappeared saying, you know what, it's now time for Magneto War. And so for the X-Men, they kind of wonder, how long has Magneto been back for? Because when they last saw him, he was kind of just knocked out because Charles Xavier had knocked out his mind. And you had Joseph going around thinking that he was Magneto. But anyways, we kind of find out that for Magneto, he had discovered Mary Purcell in her green energy form and kept her inside some kind of container. But when the X-Men had arrived at his base, he realized that his future plans, like for Magneto War, was going to get ruined. And so what he did was he had pretended to be Eric the Red of the X-Men off to buy him some time for his plans down the road. Now, with all that being said, Magneto forgot about Mary. And so when it came to Gambit, when he was left there at that base, he found her and most likely bonded with her because she kind of did promise to help him out, to protect him. But while you have the X-Men right there doing their own kind of, investigation for Gambit, he's still doing his. And so he runs into the sister of Mary, and that would be Kim. Now, when it comes to Kim, she does kind of give more information about Mary, how like growing up, she began to see all these different kinds of things in the color of green, kind of hinting at the idea that her powers were slowly manifesting, but they didn't really come out until that car explosion, basically. But when it came to her sister, we kind of get the idea that she truly did care for Mary and wanted to figure out like what in the world was going on with Mary. But this kind of leads into the ending of the storyline because when it comes to Gambit, he does discover what Mary wants. You see, for Mary, what she wants to do now is create a child. But this child will not come in the world in an organic way. Instead, this child will come into the world in some kind of unique way where both the parents, Mary and Gambit, will both be killed off. Now, of course, for Gambit, he does not want to die. Now, you do have Rogue appear. And when it comes to Rogue, we kind of find out the X-Men had created this device that will save his life, but kill off Mary. The problem is that for Gambit, he hates the idea of killing her off because, let's not forget, Mary saved his life when he was left behind by the X-Men. But while being connected to Gambit, she had discovered that his love for Rogue is hurting him because they can't be together for real at this moment in time in Marvel Comics. But it's also her saying, I had to basically, keep you focused on me to protect you, but it also helped me because I saw what your love for her is doing to you. Now, of course, you do have him go ahead and blow up the device. And the reason why, to hopefully save his and her life. The problem is that she still dies. And it does seem like Mary is officially gone. And the book does kind of end on that note, leaving us wondering, is Mary gone possibly forever? Okay, so it has been like a good minute for us when it comes to our coverage over Gambit. I want to say like what, a month or two? Because when it came to Gambit in the late 1990s, going into the early 2000s, Marvel tried to give an ongoing book. And the thing was, it did last for a good period of time. But the problem was that for us in our coverage over the X-Men, we had a lot to cover. Apocalypse the 12, X-Men Powerless, Ages of Apocalypse. There were some other storylines as well. And you had X Force, Generation X. Like, we had so many different things to cover that for Gambit, unfortunately, he kind of fell aside for a little bit there. But you know what? Let's go ahead and get back on track, right? So we're going to pick up with Gambit issue number 11. And the reason why, because it's the first storyline seen with Gambit teaming up with Daredevil. Now, it does for me at first sound kind of weird, right? But then it kind of makes sense. I don't know why. Like, it makes a lot of sense for these two characters to meet up with one another. And so, in the opening pages for issue number 11, we pick up with Daredevil right now chasing after the Constrictor. Now, for me personally, I know this character from the Masters of Evil. Now, over the years in Marvel Comics, he had joined so many different groups. But right now, currently, is him right now just on the run. And the reason why, because he has stole a synthetic organ. And I know I just mispronounced that first word, guys. Please forgive me. But the organ was made out of adamantium. Now, here's the thing. There is this judge that has this like stomach disorder. And the only way to survive is with that organ the Constrictor had just stole. And so you have our good old boy, Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, right now chasing after him to get that organ back for that judge. That judge is a close friend of Matt Murdock. Now, shortly after, you do have Gambit get involved. The reason why, because for Gambit, he wants the different arms that the Constrictor uses when it comes to battling against other people. And the reason why, because these arms that he does use, well, they're also made of adamantium. Now, for Gambit, it's a completely different reason. And the reason why, because it's Gambit right now wanting to help out Sabretooth, because we had learned in the earlier storyline that when it came to Apocalypse, that he had stolen the adamantium out of the body of Sabretooth and gave it right back over to Wolverine. Now, of course, for Sabretooth, he's having a hard time surviving that kind of process. So it's our good old boy right now trying to help out Sabretooth. So once you have the Constrictor get away, it's our two heroes agreeing to work together to hopefully bring him down. Now, right in the middle of all of this, we get an interlude. Like every single issue, we do get this random interlude, right? And we're picking up with the Fontanelle, and I really hope I pronounce her name correctly. It has been a good minute. But when it comes to her character, she's kind of working for, well, the new Sun. Now, when it comes to this character, she's been entering different dreams of different people who may have some kind of connection to, well, Gambit. Like, for example, the idea of Mr. Sinister. And so when it comes to Mr. Sinister, in this dream, he was really worried or very intrigued, not really worried, more intrigued over a certain murder case. And so she wants to know, why was he so concerned or intrigued by that murder case and what is connection to, well, Gambit? Now, really, most of this issue is really more of us just seeing Gambit and Daredevil working together to bring down the Constrictor. So guys, you want this long video or a long like length in the video where it's like 8 minutes for the whole entire chapter, it ain't gonna happen here, because honestly, what you have right now is really more of us just seeing Gambit and Daredevil working together to hunt down the Constrictor. Now, once they realize where he's going to, we kind of get a better idea why you have the Constrictor go out of his way to steal this organ that's made out of adamantium from a judge who technically needs it. You see, there was this crime boss, a crime boss known as Frankie. You see, when it came to Frankie, he had a lot of enemies out there. You see, when he was away in prison, what they did was they put small pieces of glass inside his food. And so, of course, by the time it entered his stomach, well, it was close to killing him. And so he went his way to kind of force the Constrictor to steal that organ to replace his stomach so that he'll survive. Here's the catch though. You see, what he did was, see, Frankie had a daughter. His daughter was dating the Constrictor. He's all like, listen, if you want to continue to date my daughter, well, do the job. If you don't, I'll kill her. And so, of course, for Constrictor, he had no choice but to go out of his way to, well, complete the job. Now, once you have our heroes arrive, you didn't have our heroes make a deal with him. You see, for Gambit, what he did was he used his power in a way to kind of remove all the different small pieces of glasses inside his stomach. And with that happening, that also means that now the judge can get the organ. Now, for Gambit, all he wants in return is a small piece adamantium from the Constrictor's arms to give over to Sabretooth. Like, literally, that's the entire issue for issue number 11. It was fun, but at the same time, kind of like, that's it? I want a little more, just saying, just saying. But let's go ahead and get into Gambit issue number 12. And here's the reason why, because we're now getting into the whole storyline where it's going to be Gambit right now becoming the thief of time. And yes, you're that right, the thief of time. And so we do pick up with Gambit right now, meeting up with a character I'm seeing in a little while. And when I say a little while, I mean more like our coverage over the X-Men. And that will be Sekhmet Conaway. Now, for Conaway, she is an engineer, but also in past storylines, she has helped Gambit out on different kinds of like missions. But the reason why he came to her right now is to, well, find a way to time travel. Now, here's the question. Why in the world does Gambit need to travel in time? Well, we did get a flashback. And so with this flashback, we do pick up with Gambit right now, meeting go with the current leader of the Thieves Guild, and that would be his father, Gene. And also, well, Tanti Maddie, who's kind of like the sorceress or also like the healer for the guild as well. Now, the reason why, because they've been holding on to this box for 100 years. Inside that box is a picture of Gambit as a grown man, but back in the 1800s. The question is right now, how in the world is that even possible? Now, when it came to another character, as we saw earlier, the Fontanelle, we saw her go in the minds of different people like Mr. Sinister. Well, in past issues, she had entered the mind of Jean and also Maddie as well. They also realized something, that it has been told many times in the past that Gambit, or someone in the family line, was able to save the Thieves Guild in their bond with Kendra. And so they truly believe that it had to be Gambit, because there's a picture of him back in the 1800s around the same time that he had supposedly, saved the Thieves Guild. But on top of that, back in that same time period, he was the reason that kind of led G becoming or wanting to become a great leader for the Thieves Guild. And so that's why it's kind of like, hey, listen, we need you right now to go back in time and do whatever you did. Now, the reason why for Gene, he does not remember the past is because he had touched this powerful jewel that only appears like every few years, every few decades. And so because he did that, his mind is somewhat fractured when it comes to his past or the early days of his life. But all he does remember that there was someone who inspired him. Now, for Maddie, we don't know everything about her just yet, but it's now Gambit wondering, how in the world will he go back in time? And that's where Conaway comes in, because for Conaway, she does have different ideas of like what they could possibly use to help Gambit travel back in time. And so she then gives the idea of, well, a time machine that Doctor Doom has. Now for Gambit, he's like, oh, you know what? We're going to Latveria. I do know a couple of guys who could possibly help me get into Latveria. Now, before we actually see like who he's talking about, we also see him pick up Courier once again, like every single time, almost every single storyline. We also learn that he meant the Mingo brothers. Now, the Mingo brothers appear in an earlier storyline involving another character known as the Pig. Now, I'm not going to sit down and dive too much in that storyline, but it's them saying like, we should shoot you because you left us behind on a raft for 3 days. We barely survived. But as Gambit saying, did y'all forget that y'all tried to slaughter my family and torture me? But it's also Gambit saying like, right now, if you help me, then technically I will owe you, or I owe you one. So how about that? Help me, and in the future down the road, you can call me for almost anything you possibly need. And for the Mingo brothers, that's a great deal right there. And so this kind of leads into the next few pages being really more like just Gambit, Courier, Conaway, and the Mingo brothers working their way over to like where Latveria is, getting into Doom Castle, because the Mingo brothers do know a way to get inside. Now, for Doctor Doom, he was not around at this point in time in Marvel Comics. And if I remember correctly, and guys, I don't, tell me down in the comments below, when it came to Doctor Doom, he was still stuck in the Heroes Reborn reality. As we all know, when it came to Marvel Comics in the late 1990s, they were kind of struggling, right? And so what they did was they kind of like canceled a lot of different books and then pushed certain characters that were supposedly no longer selling into a different reality. And then brought in like old writers who fans loved in the early 90s and see if those old writers or artists could kind of bring new life to those characters. So like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, not Thor, Thor's talking about the Avengers, Fantastic Four. But again, all those books took place in the alternate reality. There still are heroes from the main universe, just pushed into a different reality. Well, once our heroes came back over to the main Marvel universe, Doctor Doom kind of got left behind. And so for Gambit, he's like, listen, no one has seen Doom since the idea of Onslaught, because Onslaught was used to push our heroes into this alternate reality known again as Heroes Reborn. And so when our characters right now get inside Doom Castle and they see all these different Doctor Dooms, it's Gambit saying like, this ain't the real Doom. He ain't here. He's gone. Move on. Now, you do have Gambit and Courier find the time machine, use the time machine, and they do go back in time. Now, for Gambit, what he has to do right now is find a Thieves Guild. And he believes there's one person who could basically help him. And that will be Adam Worth. Now, for Adam Worth, he's not really like a major character in Marvel Comics, just that he was this great thief around this time period that Gambit and the Courier are currently in at the moment. And so for Gambit, he believes that Adam Worth could be able to help locate the Thieves Guild. And so once you have the two of them being able to locate his home, work themselves inside his home to meet the actual guy, this begins Gambit's mission to find the Thieves Guild and hopefully restore it, but also their connection with Kandra. That's the main thing right there. To restore the Thieves Guild, they also got to restore things between the Thieves Guild and also Kandra. And let's go ahead and switch over to Kandra. Now, for Kandra, as we all know, she is an external, not an eternal, externals. This is a different group out there in Marvel Comics where there are a group of mutants who are, well, they have immortality. She is one of them. And they all have like different schemes for the world and everything, right? And so when it comes to Kandra, she's the one kind of controls the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Clan as well. But here's the thing, right now, we're mainly focusing on the Thieves Guild because they were tasked to steal the princess jewel that we saw in the earlier storyline that no one was able to get their hands on and keep their hands on for a good period of time. It only appears like every like 2 or 3 decades. I think a little more than that actually. But anyways, because the Thieves Guild had failed to give her that princess jewel, she's kind of been on the bad side, or for her mindset, they're on her bad side. And so the Thieves Guild has been trying their best to please, to get back on the good side of Kandra. But the problem is that every single item they steal to hopefully please her does not equal the same amount of importance as the princess jewel. I also forgot to mention that around this time in Marvel Comics, the Thieves Guild was being led by, well, Gambit's grandfather. And you see what I mean here in a moment, because when we do switch over to Gambit and also Courier and Adam, they do find out where the Thieves Guild has went to hopefully, get something else to please Kandra. And of course, that's information from, well, the home of Nathaniel Essex, better known as Mr. Sinister. And so once you do have our 3 heroes walk inside his home, they do find the Thieves Guild, right? But also, as Gambit saying, like, I can use this to hopefully begin the process to please Kandra. Now, when it comes to Kandra, we currently see her holding on to 2 different people. One being Gambit's father, Gene, as a young boy, but also Gene's best friend, Belize, as well. Now, when it comes to Kandra, it's kind of using the young boys as a way to kind of get what she wants, hoping to kind of inspire his father, Gambit's grandfather, to do better when it comes to collecting different things to please Kandra. Now, for Gambit's grandfather, he does walk in with a few members of the Thieves Guild. When they walk in, he's all like, listen, I think I have something that might finally please you, something worth to know about the tomorrow. And what he really says is more of like how to control tomorrow. Basically, being like, what if I have an idea to tell you information about the future that you could technically control to make things better for you down the road? Now, the reason why he is saying that because outside right now is Gambit and also Courier. And the big question is right now, is Gambit right now gonna share over information about the future that could help Kendra out, but also please her to help restore the Thieves Guild with their connection. And so it's Gambit saying like everything I give her should possibly help us out. Now it's also Courier kind of wondering like, but what if she used information to change possibly the timeline down the road? Now for Gambit kind of feels like things should be okay. The different things that Courier worry about right now don't really appear in Marvel's timeline or in Gambit's timeline, at least. Like the idea of Apocalypse. For Kendra, there's no way she'll go out of her way to try to kill Apocalypse because in timeline, she didn't do that. Now, this kind of leads into the ending of the first chapter, where it's really more of Gambit right now confronting Kendra. And what he wants to do is give her information from Mr. Sinister about Apocalypse. Because again, Apocalypse kind of like an external as well in a way, right? And so what he's trying to say is that if I could be able to find Mr. Sinister, collect information from him about Apocalypse, and give that info over to you, that should help restore you and the Thieves Guild's connection. Now, the Thieves Guild's kind of like, no, we ourselves should go out our own way to pay off our debt. We'll find Mr. Sinister and get that info from him to about Apocalypse over to you, Kendra. So it's kind of weird right now, right? Because you have two parties who are literally trying to do the same thing. They're both trying to restore the order of the Thieves Guild with Kendra, but like one group being led by Gambit's grandfather is wanting it their own way. But it's Gambit saying like, no, if they do it, things are not going to work out. So let me do it instead. And so you have Gambit go out of his way to grab his father, who's right now a young boy, to kind of use him to kind of keep the Thieves Guild on edge. But also they're now racing in time to hopefully find Mr. Sinister before the Thieves Guild do. Now, for Gambit, he's in luck because he knows where Mr. Sinister is at. Because around this time in Marvel Comics for Mr. Sinister, he was using a different name, but also involved in a very special case, better known as the Black Womb Survivor. I just realized I call it the Black Womb Survivor. It's the Black Womb Killer. Now, this is going to bring in a character that's going to reappear a few times in Marvel Comics. Oh, matter of fact, she only died recently, I want to say in a Cable comic. But when it comes to Gambit, we do see that him, Courier, and also Gambit's father, who's a young boy right now, Jean, heading over to New York to hopefully find, well, Mr. Sinister. Now, luckily for them, you had Gambit go out of his way to blackmail Adam Worth to hand them a boat to use to cross the ocean. Now, their main goal is to hopefully find Mr. Sinister before the Thieves Guild find him, ruin the whole entire plan that Gambit has to, well, help the Thieves Guild out. Now, when it comes to Jean's childhood friend, Release, he's also with the Thieves Guild right now as they head over to, well, New York. Now, it's Release being the one in the Thieves Guild to kind of figure out that when it came to Nathaniel Essex, he had changed his name to Dr. Milbury. Now, this leads into a whole major plot line when it comes to the Black Womb Killer and the character who's heavily involved in this storyline. Now, in this chapter alone, we don't see much of her, but in later books, man, you had Marvel kind of expand on the character in some kind of really interesting but messy, weird ways as well. But now that Thieves Guild now know where to find, well, Nathaniel Essex. But I want to go ahead and shift over to Gambit and also Courier and, well, Jean. Really, I want to focus more on Courier because for Courier, he has the ability to control his entire cellular structure. Now, that part is really important. And the reason why, because for Dr. Milbury, Nathaniel Essex, he's right now a doctor. He's an obstetrician. I know I just butchered that. But of course, he's a female doctor. And so you have Gambit say, hey, Courier, change your whole entire body to become a woman and go in there, get an appointment, and get close to him and learn some things about him. Here's the problem though, because yes, he gets the appointment, but he also gave over a blood sample. And so for Mr. Sinister, once he had looked at that blood sample, he realized Courier has very interesting structure. And so you have Sinister go out of his way to capture Courier. Now, for Gambit and Jean, they have no idea. But right now, Homeboy has been officially captured. Now, we're also kind of given this interlude, right? Now, this interlude, of course, being used as a way to focus on the Fontanelle once again as she goes into the mind of another character who's close to, well, Gambit, and now be Belladonna. Now, for Belladonna, she was the first love of Gambit, Romeo and Juliet, because she's part of the Assassin Guild. And so the two of them were not really allowed to be together, especially when it came to her father. We see that apparently her father knew something very important about Gambit and how he's very important for both of the guilds. And that could be the reason why he doesn't want his daughter to date Gambit. Now, again, this is right now the Fontanelle in the dream of Belladonna, trying to learn more about Gambit and her connection to the guy. But she also realized that she actually hates the man that she truly loves. Like Fontanelle says, I can tell right now in your body, your mind, your soul, you hate Gambit. But as we do switch back over to Gambit and Jean, you do have the two of them get ambushed by the Thieves Guild because the leader of the group right now is, well, Jean's father, Gambit's grandfather. So, of course, right now, he wants his son back. Now, for Gambit, he truly believes that Jean's on his side, but you have Jean betray him, knock out Gambit, and rejoins the Thieves Guild. Now, when Gambit does wake up, he's then confronted by Amanda Mueller. Now, she's the character I kind of been hinting at the entire time because for Amanda Mueller, what she had been doing was she was having these miscarriages. Now, she was doing it on purpose because the deal she made with Mr. Sinister. As a matter of fact, as we get through our coverage over Gambit, going to learn a whole lot more about her. But she said if these Guild arrived first, trying to look for Dr. Milbury, I told them where to go. And he's like, hey, listen, I need you right now to tell me where you told them because I got to stop them, but also find him as well. And so this kind of leads into the ending of this chapter where we see the Thieves Guild go in the tunnels of New York, right? But then out of nowhere, they're then attacked by these random people who work for Mr. Sinister. Now, for Gambit, he does arrive moments later, but the entire Thieves Guild is gone. And so once you have Gambit kind of go through the tunnels, he finds the lab that belongs to Mr. Sinister. Now, it's also Mr. Sinister saying like, hey, listen, I know what you came here for, to say the Thieves Guild, but also I want to show you something. I also have your courier friend here. If you want him back, you gotta make a deal with me. And so this kind of leads into the very complicated, not really complicated, but a very long chapter here. So here's a full breakdown what happens. So when it comes to Gambit, he makes a deal with Mr. Sinister. Part of the deal is that he's going to allow Mr. Sinister, going to give the Thieves Guild the chance to locate one person, Ozymandias. Now, we have talked a lot about his character, that he has the ability to kind of see the possible futures. He writes those futures on stones, but works for Apocalypse. And so they're kind of hoping to find a different text that he had created to understand the future that Apocalypse might bring down the road. Now, part of that deal as well is that for Mr. Sinister, he gets a sample of the courier because the courier has the ability to morph to almost anything. But it's also Sinister saying like, I'll turn the courier back into what he was when I first met him. Now, that part right there is a tiny bit of a problem. And the reason why, because for Mr. Sinister, he met the courier as a woman. And right now for the courier, he's in this weird liquid state. And so once you have Sinister turn him back to normal, he's now permanently stuck as a woman. But I want to go ahead and switch over to this random interlude. And the reason why, because in this interlude, it's really more of us picking up with Rogue, right? And you have Rogue right now being confronted in her dreams by the Fontanelle, who's basically telling Rogue that she has to go out of her way to help out Gambit. Because for Gambit, when him and Curry were back in time, they left the rest of the crew in Doom's castle, and that crew right now might be in danger. But it's also kind of using Rogue as a way to finally bring him, well, back home. Now, with that being said, we then jump over to another interlude. This one deals more with Archangel meeting go with the new sun. Now, we still have no idea who the new sun is, but you have the new sun give Archangel his first assignment. That assignment is to kill off, well, Gambit. Now, back in the past, we do see Mr. Sinister, Courier, and Gambit being able to head over to where the Thieves Guild is at, but also where Ozymandias is at as well. Now, when it comes to Kendra, she also arrives there, and her goal is to use the text that Ozymandias has as a way to attack Apocalypse. Now, she is stopped by Gambit and also Mr. Sinister, but once he does stop her, he then hands her over to the externals, like, hey, they're not happy about the idea of her trying to disturb Apocalypse. Like, there's some things you don't do. One of those things is to disturb Apocalypse, who can most likely easily defeat them. Now, once you do have that happen, you then have Gambit go out of his way to tell Sinister to make sure that every single member of the Thieves Guild forgets about all the different secrets they have learned about Apocalypse when it came to Ozymandias' text. And so this leads into the ending where it's really more of us finding out that you had Gambit make sure that all the different secrets of the Thieves Guild, Ozymandias' texts, are locked away inside the mind of Gambit by Mr. Sinister. And only Mr. Sinister has the ability to unlock those secrets in the mind of Gambit. Now, it's also Gambit and Curry about to leave, but you also have Curry bring a few things up. He's like, listen, you stop Kendra, and with her being with the externals right now, she's gone for at least 100 years. But also, you gave Sinister more power than he had his time period before we arrived. And what he means by that is, with Sinister now having a sample of the courier's ability to control his whole cellular structure, now Mr. Sinister also has that ability as well. But you didn't have Courier say, oh yeah, another thing, I'm now stuck as a woman, but on top of that, we don't have a way to get back home. Because when it came to Conaway at the very beginning of the storyline, she told the time machine to send our two heroes back in time, but never did set anything to bring them back home. And so okay, so this is going to be a short video basically because it's part of our coverage over X-Men Revolution, and of course the next crossover at the cover, but it's not really a crossover. Let me explain. You see, when it came to X-Men Powerless, had this massive, not massive, but a storyline where you had the mutant race across the world lose their powers completely thanks to the High Evolutionary. Now, by the end of that storyline, you had the X-Men being able to restore the powers of all different mutants across the world, right? And that was the end of X-Men Powerless. But going into X-Men Revolution, it was the idea of like, okay, you know what? It's going to be a time jump from the last storyline to this storyline in all the different X books. So X-Force, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, Gambit, X-Man, Generation X, Cable, Wolverine, like all the different X books had this supposed time jump. Now, we already covered Wolverine, right? And Wolverine did not really have a massive time jump, but for Gambit, there's a time jump from the last storyline leading into this storyline. Now, tell you right now, we're gonna go ahead and skip over like issue number 15. And honestly, it's an okay issue, but I kind of want to go ahead and just dive into the idea of the regular storyline for Gambit. Because in the opening page of this storyline, we pick up with Gambit right now, it's the present day. We see Gambit has been badly wounded, and we're kind of left to wonder like, okay, what exactly happened to Gambit? Who had possibly done this to him? And we're not really told until the very last page of this storyline, but this part right here leads into a 4-part storyline I'm going to cover down the road. And so now we jump back weeks ago, right? And we pick up with Gambit right now coming back home. And this is huge because for Gambit, the last storyline we had covered, him and Courier went back in time, right? And even though they were able to finish their mission, they got stuck in the past. So the question is right now, how in the world were they able to make it back over to the present day, right? Now, let's not forget, at the end of that storyline for Mr. Sinister, he was able to do brain surgery on Gambit and removed a small part of his brain that allowed Gambit to, keep his powers in check. With that part being removed, well, it allowed the hero to now just have free will his powers to the point where he was then able to use his powers to travel back into the present day. Because for Gambit, he's always charging up kinetic energy. And so for him right now, he's like always charged up to the point where now he kind of has this biofield around him, right? And with the biofield being around him, he's now able to kiss Rogue without her powers technically activating. So it does seem like everything's going great for him. Now we know why it is, because he had brain surgery done by Mr. Sinister in the past, but for Rogue, she has no idea about that really. But now we're able to transition over to the new son. And the new son, we don't know anything about his character yet. All we know is like his main goal is to, for some reason, protect this reality version of Gambit possibly, or gather more information about this reality version of Gambit. And so when it comes to New Sun, because he had Fontanelle going to different minds of different people who may have been connected to Gambit, because she had collected all the info that is needed, he's done with her. He just sends her away. But Courier, she still works for him. Now, reason why I say she, because originally when it came to Courier, it was a boy. But the problem was that when him and Gambit went back in time, they were caught by Mr. Sinister, who done some work on Courier. And so even though he controlled his whole entire, cellular structure, he always reverts back into a form of a woman now, thanks to Mr. Sinister again doing some experiments on him. And so right now you have the new son telling Courier like, okay, listen, you're still devoted to me, right? It's now time for the next part of our plan. So go out there and begin the next part of our plan. Now we do jump forward another week in time, but we're still in the past, right? And so we pick up Rogue and Gambit right now having this conversation. It does take place shortly after we see him arriving back home and now being able to kiss Rogue. And so while you do have the two head over to this bar, you have the two of them kind of discuss like no longer holding secrets from one another. And that right there is really important, because for Gambit, even though he's a fan favorite character, he kind of always been that guy where like he's very mysterious, right? And every single time they learn one piece of information about him, it kind of affects the entire X-Men team in some kind of way, right? Like, for example, we had learned that for Gambit, he was responsible for, not responsible, but like he did help out with the Mutant Massacre, the first X-Men crossover event. But anyways, when it comes to two characters, Rogue and Gambit, they're saying like, we should no longer hold secrets from one another, right? And so for Gambit, he asks Rogue, what is your real name? She does not answer him. But for Rogue, she wants to know what exactly happened in New Orleans. And for Gambit, he gets upset about the idea of that question and just walks away. Because to him, it's kind of like, it's not fair that other members of the X-Men have the right to hold their past in their own mind. But for me, I have to tell y'all everything about me. And that's not fair. But now we have to pick up with Tante Maddie. Now for her character, we saw her in earlier storylines, a close friend of Gambit, but she's heading over to the Assassin Guild. Here's the reason why, because for her main goal right now, she wants to convince Belladonna to not finish the contract. This contract is, of course, a hit on Gambit, her ex-husband. So it's kind of like, oh, things have gone south very quickly here when it comes to the Assassin Guild. But now we have to switch over to Constrictor. Now for Constrictor, him and Gambit do have a past with one another, but it's not really told to us all the way yet, right? Now for Constrictor, with Justin Hammer being this rich guy, his own company, Hammer Enterprises, he gives him some upgrades over to Constrictor. But he said, listen, you now must help me out as I helped you. And so then you have Courier arrive. And apparently Courier has information from the new sun about some high-tech technology that Justin wants. The problem is that for Justin to get information, Constrictor has to kill off Gambit. And so for Constrictor, that's a good deal because he wants payback against Gambit. Now, getting back over to Gambit, more time has passed by. And let's not forget, his powers have evolved. But it got even worse, though, to the point where he's always charged up, where he does burn Colossus and also Rogue. And so they're kind of concerned by his powers. And it really does show, because when he does go outside the lake or the pond to the school of Charles Xavier, because again, he's always so charged up, the entire lake just blows up just like that. clearing up the entire water. And it kind of shows that for Gambit now, his powers are no longer in his control anymore. But things get even worse because you didn't have to be attacked by these two D-list characters. And the two D-list characters not really important for the overall storyline because technically they're only here for two things. Kind of show there are assassins out there that have been sent after Gambit, but also like when it comes to Gambit, his powers being unchecked, they had continued to evolve to the point where now, without even touching people, touching objects, they're now being charged up. And so it kind of shows his powers are no longer his control. Now you have Colossus and Rogue appear to help him defeat the two villains, which they do. But now the question is, what is happening to his powers at this exact moment? And so when it comes to Beast and Dr. Reyes, they're kind of like, hey, Rogue, listen, we did some work on Gambit, some lab work, and we realized his powers are becoming totally out of control. So like, we want to see you're able to kind of talk to him and get information out of him so we kind of know how to help him. But once again, for Gambit, it's the idea of secrets. It's him not really able to tell them everything to know. Like, for example, it was Mr. Sinister who took that small piece of his brain that kept his powers in check. And so for Gambit, it's him and Rogue right now, once again, that same spot all over again. The idea that they want to be together. They love each other. But unfortunately, it's him holding on to secrets and keeping those secrets from her, which of course makes things hard for them to be going forward. And so once again, he's not ready to tell her everything about him at the moment. And so he just leaves, right? And so to close on these flashbacks, we do see that for Gambit, well, he's now officially in charge of the Thieves Guild, right? So just like that, we're seeing a lot of changes being done for Gambit because again, for X-Men Revolution, it's the idea of the time jump. And so we're now getting information of what took place in that time jump for our hero. So getting to the last page, we're back in the present day. And with that happening, we're now seeing that for Gambit, well, he was stabbed by Bullseye. And so it leaves us wondering like, okay, why did Bullseye stab Gambit for? And so this leads into a 4-part storyline I'm going to cover soon on the channel. With that being said, guys, please. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to pick up with Gambit once again. Now, we are still going to cover X-Men Revolution. We still have to cover Generation X. I want to say also X-Man and Cable and X-Force when it comes to their parts in the whole Revolution era of X-Men comics. But I kind of want to go ahead and switch over to Gambit because for Gambit, we kind of left off on a cliffhanger, right? The idea of the assassination game was the next big storyline we had to cover. Now, it's only 3 parts long, right? But it's the idea that for Gambit, going to have different characters come after him because somebody had put a contract out on Gambit. And so in our last video, we kind of left off with the idea of Bullseye might be able to kill off Gambit. And so when it comes to the opening pages of the storyline, we do pick up with Bullseye standing over Gambit. So kind of picking up where our last video left off at, right? Now, here's the thing, because with Bullseye for me, I feel like this. If you are a regular person, you're dead. There's no way you'll be able to survive against Bullseye. But if you're some kind of hero, you might have a chance, you know? And so for Bullseye being here, it's kind of like, this is a big deal. With the contract out there on Gambit's head, it basically means like all the different kind of killers in Marvel Comics are going to come after Gambit. It all began with Bullseye, somebody who's very efficient when it comes to killing someone off. But luckily for Gambit, help does arrive. But that help is not really help because it is the Assassin Guild. Now, for the Assassin Guild, they're also coming after Gambit, but they also have to deal with Bullseye. So you have these 3 assassins appear as different versions of Daredevil. Because for Bullseye, seeing, you know, good old Daredevil does really bother him a lot. But this kind of battle between those 2 groups right there allow our boy Gambit to get away for the time being. But now we switch over to Valerie Cooper, and for me, it's been a long time since we last saw Valerie Cooper. And for me, the last time we had officially saw her in some kind of like big X-Men storyline was really back in X Factor comics when you had Havoc and Forge kind of take over the idea of X Factor, and they really were more a government team. But we do switch over to the Commission for Superhuman Activity because they realize that different kinds of people are right now trying to locate Gambit. So like Zoran and Batroc. And so it's her saying, let's go ahead and get involved. And so she has one agent in mind who could help Gambit out. And that will be Carl Denty. But as we do switch back over to Gambit, we see him right now being healed up because he was founded by the different members of the Thieves Guild. Now, we're also being reintroduced to his sister-in-law, and that will be Mercy. We also see good old Maddie there as well, trying to help heal up Gambit. But the question is right now, who in the world has hired the Assassin Guild to come after Gambit? Because this is a pretty big deal at the moment. Now, every single issue of Gambit, we're kind of giving these interludes, right? Kind of telling us what's to come down the road. And so we do pick up with the Fontanelle. Now, she has the ability to go into the minds of different people while they're dreaming. And so right now, she's in the mind of the Courier. Now, for the Courier and Fontanelle and even Gambit himself, they were all working for a new character, the New Sun. We don't know much about the New Sun just yet, but we get the idea that he does have some major plan that involves Gambit. Now, for Fontanelle, she was kind of fired by the New Sun, but it's her right now questioning the Courier like, what are you going to do? Are you going to continue to help the New Sun out, or are you going to be a good friend and help protect Gambit? Right after that moment right there, she went into the mind of Gambit to, well, basically warn him about the New Sun, but also kind of the idea of things coming down the road, making things very complicated for his life. And so for Gambit right now, he realized that he's dreaming because he sees the Fontanelle, but also two, he kind of realized that she's trying to give him a warning. And that warning right now, again, is the New Sun, but also there's someone else coming after him. And so when he does wake up, he realized that he's now confronted by the Constrictor. Now, for the Thieves Guild, who was healing up Gambit, they were knocked out. And so when they wake up, one, our boy's gone, and two, they're now being confronted by the Assassin Guild. And they kind of force everyone and kind of tell them more information about what happened to Gambit. Like, where in the world is he? And they tell him like he's no longer here because he was now battling against the Constrictor now. And so the rest of this chapter is really more of us just seeing Gambit right now trying to survive. Like, for example, while fighting against the Constrictor and trying his best to survive, the Constrictor is knocked out because another assassin had entered the game, and that would be Deadpool. And so it's like, okay, this got a whole lot worse because Deadpool is someone I don't think our boy can actually handle. But it's him saying like, listen, I got some money out there. You know, they're offering you $1 million. I'll double it. Heck, I will triple it if you leave me alone. And for Deadpool, easy, fine, go ahead. Thinking right now, though, I want that money. And so while you do have our boy getting away, he's then confronted by Jack Farley. Now, Jack Farley is not a really important character at all. Matter of fact, for me personally, Jack Farley is just a lackey who works for the Executioner, another somewhat big character in Marvel comics at this time in X-Men comics. And so for Jack Farley, what he did was he took the tech he got from the Executioner and began to call himself Fireballs. Guys, real quick. I hate the name so much. I don't know why. It sounds so bad. Like, what are you? Go ahead and call me Fireballs. Like, that's your name you want to go with? But anyways, you do have our boy being able to get away, but also he was saved at the very last second by a federal agent. Of course, that would be Carl Denty, who's going to help him get away. The problem is that while you do have the two characters trying to get away, they're also confronted by the Executioner in the closing part of the first chapter of this storyline. And so as we get into the second chapter, well, we're getting to the idea of figuring out who is the Executioner. Let me explain. Because for Carl Denty, In the earlier days, the 1990s, up to now, he was the executioner. So the idea of him right now being a federal agent and our heroes right now being confronted by somebody else who's currently piloting the executioner armor, leaving us wondering who in the world could possibly be the new executioner. But on top of that, you also have Fireballs coming back to the picture again. I just hate saying that name, Fireball. But anyways, you do have Gambit right now trying to use his powers to protect himself, but to also protect Carl as well. So the battle continues on. Now, for the Assassin Guild, they're still trying to follow Gambit's trail, right? And so they follow the trail that leads right over to Deadpool. Now, when it comes to Deadpool, he tells them, like, listen, he offered me triple the money, so $3 million. Of course, I let him get away. Like, why wouldn't I? The thing is, you have Belladonna, the leader of the Assassin Guild, the ex-wife of Gambit, say, the check he hands you is worthless. Knowing Gambit, he has no money at all. He just tricked you so you allow him to get away. Now, while that's happening over there, we have the courier calling up Archangel saying like, hey, listen, your boy needs help. Can you help him? Now, for Archangel, he reminds us that it was the new sun. It was Courier who had basically put that contract out there for different assassins to kill off Gambit. It's part of New Sun's big master plan. But for Archangel, he'll get involved to hopefully help out Gambit. Now, we do switch back over to Gambit and also Carl. They're still on the run, right? The problem is that while trying to get to a boat to get away, they're then confronted by Patroc and also Zoran. So again, two characters who earlier in like the last video tried to kill off Gambit but failed are now back in the picture again to get their hands on that money. Now for Gambit, he's trying his best to get away. Here comes the big problem though. They also run into Crossbones as well. So again, all these different kind of characters are just popping up left to right to kind of, get the money from Gambit's death. Now you also have Carl being able to scare Crossbones, and for me it's kind of like, okay, I get it. Like Carl is someone who might actually shoot and kill Crossbones, but at the same time, this is Crossbones. Like to be easily scared by some guy you don't truly know is weird. But you also have Crossbones being very upset with Zoran and also Patroc because in an earlier storyline and over in Steve Rogers' comic book series, Captain America comics, you had these two guys kind of caused him to get his hands on the blood diamond. So now his attention has been shifted off Gambit over to these two guys. And so this kind of leads us back over to the Thieves Guild, who were following the trail of Gambit as well, and that led them right over to Deadpool. And so you have Deadpool informing the same thing he told the Assassin Guild. The funny part is, the Thieves Guild tell Deadpool, like, yeah, Belladonna does not know everything about Gambit, so most likely that check wasn't worthless. Like, most likely, that check did have some money in there, dog, and you just lost it. And for Deadpool, he begins to freak out so much. But now we can kind of transition to the ending of this chapter, right? Because for Gambit and also Carl, they're still being hunted down the Executioner. We have no idea who's right now inside that armor, right? Now, the Assassin Guild does appear. And for Gambit, that is kind of confusing. Like, why in the world would the Assassin Guild, send a contract out to get me killed and then try to help me not get killed by the different people who want me dead for the money? And for Belladonna, because she wants to make sure that she is the one to kill off Gambit, right? But then, out of nowhere, you have, the different members of the Assassin Guild make the armor of the Executioner kind of go crazy, to the point where he fires missile inside the building that Belladonna and Gambit are currently inside of, leaving us wondering if they're going to survive. And I really do like the final chapter for this storyline because it does shift over to us seeing that Gambit and Belladonna did survive the explosion, even though technically right now they are completely underneath a whole bunch of debris. For Belladonna, it's her saying like she's still in love with Gambit. And that one line right there, it's really important. Kind of explain why the Assassin Guild came after Gambit for. You see here in a moment. But While you have those two being, stuck underneath for the Assassin Guild, the Thieves Guild, they agree to call a truce to basically help one another to kind of dig out Belladonna and Gambit. The problem is that the cops arrive, and so unfortunately, they have to leave for now, right? But it's kind of cool to see the two guilds coming together to work together to save their two leaders because Belladonna is the leader of the Assassin Guild, and Gambit right now is the leader of the Thieves Guild. Now, for the courier, he was pulled once again by the new son to have another conversation, right? But it's Jacob now admitting that he does not like the current actions that the new son has been doing when it comes to Gambit. But the new son also knows that for courier, he's not going to do anything at all. Like, yeah, you can go ahead and speak up, but I already know that you can speak up, but you're not doing anything at all. You're not going to stop me. You know you can't stop me. So it's nice to hear your concerns, but like, shut up. Now, for the two guilds, they're also kind of dealing with the idea of all the assassins who are still trying to come after, Gambit, like Crossbones and the others. And so you had the three different parties kind of fighting against one another. And technically, the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild are working together to bring down the other assassins who are not part of the two guilds, but only came here because, well, they want Gambit. And also, of course, they want the, money. But getting back over to Belladonna and also Gambit, I kind of like this because it's Belladonna explaining everything to us. Like, we already know the new son was the one who put the contract out there to come after Gambit, right? But for Belladonna, it was her who the contract out the Assassin Guild to also go after Gambit. And the reason why, because she wanted to know if she still loves Gambit. Now, for me personally, that is truly messed up. Like, hey, guys, I'm gonna send my whole entire clan, or not clan, my whole entire guild to go after the man I used to love just to see if I still do love him or not. Like, what? Because, yeah, you got close to him. And yes, you could have killed him, but you did not do it because you want to see for real if you truly still love the man. But it's also Gambit kind of saying, like, he does have feelings for her, but things have changed a lot between them. Because what he's trying to say is that things have changed. Like, he still loves Belladonna, but not the way he used to because there's Rogue. And so for Gambit, he's kind of like, listen, when we were younger and we got married, and even after we got married and divorced, whatever, like, I still cared for you. I still loved you, but things have changed. And those feelings there are going to be there forever, but I kind of moved on. And so you have him use his powers in a way where he never has done before, which is just charging up all the debris around him, blowing a massive hole above Belladonna to allow him and her to, well, escape. And you do have Carl being able to cover them when it comes to cops wondering what in the world is going on here. But we're also kind of seeing a new beginning for the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild, where now they're going to work together. It's kind of like, hey, the two guilds are now going to work together as one. And this is pretty huge. But the story does kind of end on the note where it's Gambit right now just on top of some random building, looking at the city, enjoying the view, and then out of nowhere, Archangel grabs him. And that leads into our next video. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And here's the thing, because we got to cover a Gambit storyline because, well, Gambit does have a tie-in when it comes to the idea of maximum security. So I want to make sure that we go ahead and cover the few issues before that one particular issue is covered when we do dive into the idea of Gambit issue number 23 that ties into maximum security. Now, when it comes to today's video, though, we also got to cover Gambit Annual 2000 because it's an epilogue to our last video we did a while ago, the idea of the assassination game. You see, it was this storyline where you had all these different assassins coming after Gambit. And the reason why, because a contract was put out on him by a character known as the New Sun. Now, the New Sun only did that because it was him trying to supposedly help Gambit out. Now, today's storyline kind of explains why he's trying to help Gambit out. But with the New Sun, we don't know who he is just yet. This storyline here also revealed to us who the New Sun is, but also the New Sun has been trying to help get Gambit ready to help protect the world in a way. Because for New Sun, he has been looking into the multiverse to try to see all these different versions of Gambit and see when they do die or possibly don't die in their own realities. But anyways, when it came to the assassination game, that whole storyline was, again, basically different assassins coming after Gambit because the new son had put a contract out on him. Now, the storyline did end on the note where the contract time was over. And so for Gambit, he had the chance to, well, live his life, right? But then at the very end, we saw that Archangel and him were not done yet. You see, this is a callback to two different storylines that we had already covered. The idea of the trial of Gambit and also the Mutant Massacre storyline. Now, when it came to the trial of Gambit, as we all know, it was the storyline where we had discovered that Gambit had a small hand into what happened in the Mutant Massacre storyline. The idea of the Marauders going into the tunnels of the Morlocks and, well, killed off most of the Morlocks, right? And so when it came to Archangel in the Mutant Massacre storyline, well, he got badly injured to the point where he had to lose his wings, and then he found Apocalypse and became Archangel. And so once you had Archangel find out that it was Gambit's fault, he's kind of like, oh, I hate this man a lot. I want to see him dead almost. And so with the new son, he's kind of playing with that. Like, hey, listen, I know the contract is done now, but you still have all that hatred for Gambit, right? So why not go ahead and use that anger to kill off the man who is somewhat responsible for what happened to your wings? So that is why, as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we're seeing Archangel fighting against Gambit. And the thing is, for Gambit, Archangel moves too fast. And so for Gambit, he's struggling with this battle. But as the battle goes on, it's him right now just trying his best to like survive, it seems like. Now, their battle also does take place out in the public. So you have all these different people right now kind of wondering, why in the world are two different X-Men are fighting against one another? Now, luckily for Gambit, help does arrive. It's the X-Men. But the thing is, why they do grab Gambit, they're like, hey, Archangel, why in the world are you trying to attack this man? He does not answer. He just flies away. Now, for the X-Men, they want to follow him, but Gambit says, no, let him go because right now, I need to rest. Now, once you do have Archangel go report to New Sun that he did not kill off Gambit, well, New Sun is like ticked off. He's all like, what do you mean you didn't kill off Gambit? Like, you were supposed to do that. And so here the New Sun won't be left alone. But it's the courier kind of telling us that for the New Sun, his plan has to work out because if his plan does not work out, it could lead into the destruction of the whole entire world. Now, as we do switch back over to the school of Charles Xavier, we kind of learn that it's Gambit finally telling the X-Men some information about what's going on. We also kind of see Kitty Pryde's new outfit. I don't like it. Anyways, though, when it comes to Gambit, it's more him saying like, I met this guy known as the New Sun who had saved me from Antarctica when you guys had left me behind. Now, the New Sun also told me like, hey, I need you to help me help save the entire world. Now, the New Sun never did tell Gambit from who, but for Gambit, he's kind of like, listen, if I'm in debt this guy, and also that means help save the whole entire world, I'm going to do it. But now we have to switch over to a character we met a while ago, better known as Bill. Now, when it comes to Bill, he has the ability, right, to open these doorways into other realities. And so for Bill, the New Sun said, hey, come with me. And your job right now to look into other dimensions, other realities out there in the multiverse to kind of see if Gambit dies or survives. If he does die, how does he die? And so for Bill, the only thing he has been with the New Sun the entire time was that one particular task. Looking into other realities to see if, Gambit will survive or not. Now, for Bill, he also kind of gives a hint right here that New Sun's base is not really in time. It's out of time. And because usually for Bill, when he does open up these portals, they hurt him. But the idea right now, him being inside the base of the New Sun, which again is out of time, it does not hurt Bill at all. Now, you also have Bill being confronted by Archangel, who says, hey, I have a job for you to do. Now, we're not really told like what their whole entire conversation is all about, but it's the idea that you have Courier tell Archangel, hey, listen, I know that you fought against Gambit out in public because you knew that sooner or later the X-Men would arrive to stop you. But it's also Archangel saying, but I know that you the one who had called up the Thieves Guild to help Gambit survive long enough for the contract to expire. Now, it does seem like these two are going to work together, but it's Courier saying, you know, New Sun still expects you to kill off Gambit. And Archangel says, don't worry, he'll be here soon. But once you do have the X-Men arrive in the base of the New Sun, well, of course, they're then confronted by all the henchmen that work for the New Sun. Now, for Gambit and the X-Men, they are able to bring down these henchmen. The thing is that when they look inside the suits of the henchmen, they kind of find out that these suits are kind of just running on their own because there were no actual people inside those suits at all. And so for our boy Gambit, he's kind of like, what in the world is going on here? Now, they do run into Bill. And for Gambit, he's all like, my main goal is to bring down this whole entire place. But the thing is, if I do that, I got to make sure everyone gets out of here in time. And so is Gambit right now saying, Bill, your main goal is to get my team out of here, but also X-Men, I need you guys to find Bill's friend Huey and then get the heck out of here. My job right now is find Archangel and to hopefully get him out of here as well too, but to also bring down the New Sun as well. Now you do have Gambit being able to find Archangel, right? The thing is, these two are not going to fight against one another. Instead, they're going to work together now to hopefully bring down the New Sun. And so you have the two of them go confront the New Sun. And the New Sun is kind of surprised, like, wait, why in the world are you two guys working together now? Because when I last checked, Archangel, you hated that man because you said that man is responsible for what happened to your wings. But for Archangel in a Wolverine storyline, he kind of gained new powers, but also had to learn to forgive. And so he's kind of like, dude, me and him are good right now, but we got to bring you down. Now, of course, for our heroes, they do begin to struggle. But here's the thing, because while they're struggling, is Archangel telling Gambit, dude, don't you realize what's going on right now? That guy has similar powers to you, but more experience. And so the New Sun says, how dare you? Because now he knows who I am. And we kind of find out the New Sun is just Gambit from a different reality. Now, the actual origin of the New Sun is not told to us in this storyline, but instead, when it comes to the New Sun, it's really more the idea that he was the one who had pushed forward for the assassins to come after Gambit to kind of help him fully understand how to use his powers, because apparently he believes that our boy here, Gambit, will be responsible for the end of this Earth. And so with that being said, you did have the New Sun powers go a tad bit out of control to the point where now the whole entire place is going to come down. Now, again, this place is out of time, but they're then able to use a portal that is usually near the New Sun's chair, which of course does take our heroes back over to Earth. Gambit, Archangel, and also Courier. Now, when they do arrive back on Earth, you have Courier ask Archangel and also Gambit like, okay, so what could be the origin for New Sun? Like, is he, you from the past, the future, or alternate timeline? And for Archangel and Gambit, they can't really answer that question. But as we get into Gambit issue number 20, it's really more of us we're diving into the origin of the Fontanelle. Now, she has been a character that has been reappearing a few times in our coverage over this Gambit series as someone who was building a profile on Gambit, right? By going to dreams of different people who had some kind of connection to Gambit. And so as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, we see Gambit at first right now on the beach with Rogue. Now they're kissing, and that right there should tell us, okay, homeboy must be dreaming. Because for Rogue, again, he cannot touch her because of, her powers. At the same time, he can now retouch folks right now. His powers are also kind of out of control at the moment. And so the idea of these two kissing is kind of like, yeah, y'all are dreaming right now. Now, out of nowhere, Rogue does change into Belladonna. So again, another example of Homeboy is dreaming. But once he kind of realized that something's off with everything happening in this dream, well, that is when he is confronted by, well, the Fontanelle. Now, this again leads into the idea of us learning about her origin, but also like them trying to figure out what is the new son technically up to. And so while you do have these two characters right now talking in the dream of Gambit, it's really more Fontanelle kind of saying like how she was brought in, because at first she was a dream therapist. So while being a dream therapist, that was when she was recruited by the new son when he had sent over courier to, well, bring her in. Now, their main goal for her was to build a profile on him. And so when it came to Fontanelle, the first few people that she had selected to go in their dreams, kind of figure out a tad bit more about Gambit was, of course, the X-Men. Now, she kind of tells us it does take place right after the trial of Gambit, where we learned that for Gambit, he had a hand in the mutant massacre. And so once the X-Men had found out, they had left him behind in Antarctica. Now, he was saved by the new son, but for the X-Men, they didn't know that. And so when they came back for him, they couldn't find him almost anywhere at all. But for Fontanelle, she did try to go in the minds of the X-Men, but because they were trained by Charles Xavier, she did kind of have a hard time getting deep in their minds. But she did learn that they did feel very guilty for what they did to Gambit. Now, we also learned here that for the new son, his original goal when he came over to this reality was to also build like a new Earth, a new world for both mutants and humans. Now, that part right there is very important because we also learned that all the different missions that for Gambit did earlier in the series was really more him trying to help New Son achieve that goal. But the problem was that Heroes Reborn. Y'all, let me explain because Heroes Reborn is actually important for this storyline. So just in case you have anybody who never read Heroes Reborn, it was a whole idea that the late 1990s, Marvel was struggling, right? When it came to their comics. And some of their heroes were selling, some heroes weren't selling, like the Avengers and Iron Man and Thor and Hulk and things like that. And so what Marvel did was they used the event Onslaught to say, you know what, let's go ahead and say these heroes quote unquote died in the main Marvel universe, but in reality, they're just sent away into a different reality, better known as Heroes Reborn, where they had a fresh start, a new beginning, a rebirth, a relaunch in that reality. Now, when it came to the Heroes Reborn reality, well, when the sales were somewhat still not good as Marvel hoped, they took those heroes and sent those heroes back into the main Marvel universe. Now, hear me out, y'all, because when they did that, it was kind of left to believe that Earth would go away. But it did not. You had Doctor Doom stay behind and move that Earth into the main Marvel universe. And so you had two Earths going around the sun at the same time. And New Sun realized he could not place a third Earth around the sun because sooner or later, all three Earths would crash into one another. Now, it's also her kind of telling us that when it came to her continuing how to build this profile on Gambit, things did get a tad bit conflicted. And the reason why she's saying that because, well, she went into the minds, again, of different members of the X-Men, but she also went into the mind of different people who were part of the Thieves Guild, part of the Assassin Guild. And so everyone kind of had these different thoughts of Gambit, but at the same time, it still seemed like they did have some kind of respect for the guy in a way, because the power he had in him. And so it's her kind of saying like, I had a very fun time building this profile for you as a person. Now, she also tries to tell us that she did go into the mind of New Sun and she saw a few things, but again, was not really able to get a clear picture of the guy's past, but kind of got an idea of some things happened to him in his reality. Now, it's also her kind of bringing in, we're really doing a callback to an earlier storyline that we had covered, because the idea that Gambit's past is connected to his future. See, there's a storyline where you had Gambit go back in time to help out the Thieves Guild, right? Like the late 1800s. But the thing was, while being back in that time period, he ran into a character known as Mr. Sinister, but also ran into a woman known as Amanda Mueller. Now, for Amanda Mueller, she was known as the Black Womb. And the reason why, because for Mr. Sinister, he's just used to kind of give birth to babies left and right for his own personal experiments. And so we kind of find out that the Fontanelle is her daughter. Now, for Gambit, he's having a hard time believing that because when he met Amanda in the late 1800s, she was already in her early 30s, and Fontanelle's right now her late 40s, it seems like. And so the question is, how in the world is Amanda still alive that gave birth to kids in the 1900 period, but also kind of like, is she still alive? Because apparently to the Fontanelle, she says, I think my mother's still out there somewhere in the world now. But really, the rest of this issue is really more of us seeing Gambit and also Fontanelle saying like, they got to figure out the actual origin to New Sun, but also like, what is his motive as well when it comes to this Earth, when it comes to Gambit. Now, with that being said, you also have him bring up the Old Kingdom, the old prophecies about the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild as well. They also need to learn more about that as well too. But it's now Gambit saying like he has a game plan. So we do switch over to the ending of this chapter, where you also have the book remind us the idea that for Senator Kelly, he's right now trying to run for president. And that kind of leads into a big storyline where it's really more him trying to deal with the whole mutant race, right? Definitely in America. But we're going to find out that you had Gambit as courier to pretend to be Charles Xavier, kind of work his way into some government facilities. And so as we get into the next chapter, it's really more of us picking up with Gambit right now, sitting two members of the Thieves Guild inside, the hospital where he was born at. Because for Gambit, it's really more him trying to figure out like anything about his past, right? So he sent in Mercy, which is his sister-in-law, and also Emil, another member of the Thieves Guild. Now, the thing is, they do come back out, right? And you have Emil tell Gambit, like, listen, your records are not in their system at all. Now, that's not normal because usually when it comes to hospitals, they keep their records of everyone who was born at their hospital. But the thing is, for Gambit, his record is not there at all. And other folks were born there 20 years ago, their records are still there. But on top of that, it seems like 6 months ago, somebody was trying to delete information when it came to different people whose records were again at the hospital. So the question is, who in the world 6 months ago came there and tried to hide things about Gambit and possibly other people? But while you have that going on, we do switch over to this ceremony happening between the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild, because with the idea of Gambit right now working alongside Belladonna, both the guilds had finally came together. The Old Kingdom has said in their prophecies that once you do have the two guilds come together, it's then time for this special ceremony where they open up a casket known as the Casket of All Tomorrows. And apparently when they do open it, it's supposed to help guide both the guilds into their future. The problem is that when they open up the casket, it's empty. It does seem like somebody has stolen the item inside the casket. But the question is, who in the world would do that? But let's not forget that for Courier, with his ability to shapeshift, he took the form of Charles Xavier. So you have the Courier right now just pretending to be Charles as he breaks into the Pentagon. Now, while doing that and everything, you did have somebody else see him. And that would be, well, no other than Mystique, who's also right now using her ability as a shapeshifter to kind of hide in the Pentagon. But she's kind of like, wait, that's Charles Xavier. Wait, when can Charles walk? That means somebody else right now is pretending to be Charles Xavier. But getting back over to Gambit right now, it's him trying to figure out like who in the world has stolen from the casket. Now, when it comes to Belladonna and her mindset, she's kind of wondering why in the world right now should they care about anything inside a casket at all. Now, you do have different members of the Thieves Guild. Reminder that once the two guilds had came together, the old kingdom did prophesize that once it happened, then basically the old kingdom should also be resurrected. Once that happens, then it'll be heaven on earth, but everyone will be led by one particular person, their Messiah. And that chosen person is no other than, well, Gambit. Now we're also seeing some infighting happening between the two parties right now, the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild. Honestly, this makes a lot of sense because for these two guilds, they've been at war against one another for a good while in Marvel Comics, right? And so for them two to kind of work together, there's going to be a lot of period of time where you're going to have some infighting happening between both parties, right? But when it comes to the idea of Gambit, he does get a call, and it's really more the Fontanelle telling him, like, hey, she has not heard back from Courier ever since when inside the Pentagon. And so now it's him kind of wondering, did anything happen to him while being inside the Pentagon? And so this kind of leads into that section where it's really more of us seeing Gambit go over to the Pentagon, being able to sneak in the Pentagon and then find the Courier, to only find out the Courier is now a hostage to, well, Mystique. Now, when it comes to, well, Mystique, she's kind of upset because she's that kind of person. She needs info on the different people that she may go up against. And so the idea not having that info on Gambit, not having info on the X-Men or Courier and things like that, she's kind of like, what in the world did I truly miss when it comes to you? Now, for Gambit, he does not give her the info that she is looking for, but also is her kind of discovering that his powers have evolved as well, which of course kind of throws off a tad bit. But you also have Gambit say, you know what, listen, I ain't gonna tell you anything. And you have him being able to use his powers, kind of put her in her place to allow him and Courier to officially leave. Now for Gambit, once he does get back over to, home and everything, he kind of figure out like which two people were most likely the ones who had stole from the casket. But here's the catch though, because they say, yeah, we did steal from the casket, but it's not because we hate you or anything, because your father had asked us to do that. And of course, that would be Gene, the father to Gambit, his adoptive father. Now, the next chapter really kind of get into the idea of us seeing Gambit right now, just on the balcony, drinking right now, take his mind off things. And the reason why, because for Gambit right now inside, there's something big happening with the Unified Guild. The Unified Guild is a combination of the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild. But the reason why, because inside, they're going to do a vote on something. Now, with that being said, while you do have Gambit right now outside, out of nowhere, he's then attacked by Rax. Now, when it comes to Rax, Rax belongs to the Neo. The Neos were a race of, really an offshoot of the mutant race. You see, we first met them back in X-Men Powerless. The idea that when he came to High Evolutionary and also Mr. Sinister, when he went out of his way to the powers of all the mutants across the world, it also affected the Neos as well. Now, the Neos blamed the X-Men for the idea of what happened to them, but honestly, it was not the X-Men fault. But anyways, for the Neos, they kind of target the X-Men as like, their enemies. And so when it came to our good boy over here named Rax, when it comes to Rax, he's trying to kill off Gambit, but also kind of get that promotion in his clan, kind of get up in the higher ranking in his clan if he's able to kill off Gambit. Now, like I said, when it came to Gambit, he was outside trying his best to take his mind off things what's happening inside the base of the Unified Guild. The reason why, because inside, they're right now taking a vote on the idea if he should be the leader of the guild. And the reason why, because you have some folks in the guild who don't truly respect Gambit in that way and believe that he has the power to lead them in the right direction, to lead the Unified Guild. And so when it comes to like the different members, both the Assassin and the Thieves Guild, they're kind of like, you know what? We should all see if we agree on the idea if he can lead us. Now, again, there is a prophecy that says once the two guilds come together, the red-eyed baby, Gambit, will then lead them in the best direction, the right way, to bring back the old kingdom. So when it comes to the rest of this issue, it's really more of us just seeing, Gambit fighting against Rex, while you also have, or Rax, sorry, while while you have, the Unified Guild take their vote on the idea of Gambit being their leader for the seeing future and everything. And so that's kind of like the book, right? But let's go ahead and get into the interlude that's happening inside this one particular issue. But now we're kind of given this interlude, right? And this interlude really does focus more on the character, well, Bill, but also the Fontanelle who goes into his dream. Now, once she does that, she kind of sees that Bill has been looking around in different realities across multiverse at different gambits. And of course, as we saw earlier, all these different gambits that he had observed had died in some kind of way, right? But then she sees an image of one gambit, except this gambit is new sun. As we all saw in the first chapter of the video, that new sun is gambit from a different reality, right? And so what she sees right now is the new sun in this dream of Bill fighting against the heroes of Earth, but from the new sun's reality, leaving her wondering what exactly happened in that reality. But now we switch back over to Courier. Now for Courier, as we see right now, is a female person, but in reality is a male who's just trapped right now in a female form. Now, when it came to Courier, he was assigned to look into information about the Black Womb Project. That part right there, it's really important. Let me explain why. Because the whole idea of that project was based around Amanda Mueller, who was also used by Mr. Sinister, right? Now, when it came to Courier, he also found photos of Frederick Duncan. Now, Frederick Duncan was like this FBI agent and liaison for the X-Men in the early days in Marvel Comics. Now, we were told he died. We had no idea how he died. But the thing is, while looking at photos for the Courier, she sees pictures of the executioner armor right in front of Fred Duncan, leaving her wondering what in the world is going on. And so really, the rest of this issue is really more of us just seeing Gambit fighting against Rax, right? But as the battle goes on, you also have the voting happening with the Unified Guild. And so we're kind of able to see like all these different reasons why the different members may say yes or may say no to the idea of Gambit, being their leader of the Unified Guild. But again, as these two things are happening, they come together. And so we see Gambit, about to lose against Rax. And matter of fact, you do have a few more Neos arrive. Now for Rax, he will be the actual leader of the Neo. And you have the real leader appear, Domina, say, you can kill off Gambit. You'll get a new ranking, but there's no way you're the actual leader of our clan. But anyways, it's now him being surrounded by all these Neo. But luckily for Gambit, the Unified Guild does arrive. And it kind of scares off the Neo. And you didn't have Belladonna inform Gambit that thanks to the voting system, they had agreed to allow him the chance to continue on as the leader of the guild. But the ending of this issue is really more of us seeing like the return of New Sun, where he does come back to the Earth reality. So it's kind of like, okay, we're getting closer to the actual end of this series very soon when it comes to the idea of Gambit going up against the New Sun. But this is where, okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over maximum security. Now, here's the thing, because the next couple of videos, or the next 3 videos, including this one right here, is going to be like all X-Men content, because we got to cover Gambit issue number 23, X-Men issue number 107, and I want to say X-Men Unlimited issue number 29. So like, we have 3 different X-Men tie-ins going to be the next like 3 videos for our X-Men coverage, but also like our coverage over maximum security as well. So right now, over the summer, my goal is to release like 2 videos per day. So you might get 1 short video here and 1 long video at the end of the day. But anyways, though, getting back into our coverage over maximum security, like I said, we're going to pick up with Gambit issue number 23. Now, just in case we have anybody who's just getting into our coverage over maximum security, I kind of want to sit down and re-explain the whole idea of this event. You see, when it came to Marvel Comics, right, as we all know, in the late 1990s, going into the early 2000s, they were basically struggling. It was the idea that they filed for bankruptcy. No one was buying their books hardly ever anymore. And so what you had Marvel do is do some things, get folks back into the comic book stores, like Ultimate Marvel, Marvel Knights, Marvel Max. And all three of those things right there got folks back into the comic book stores. But they also gave us an event better known as Maximum Security. Now, this event was like 3 issues long with some tie-ins as well. But the whole idea of this event was that you had the Intergalactic Council, right? They came together and said, you know what's a problem? Humans are a problem. You have humans just pop up anywhere across the universe and they decide that they want to help out different people in different areas that belong to different empires in the universe. And sometimes they do help out greatly. And sometimes they make things even worse for those people they're trying to help out. And so you have the council say, humans should be locked away on Earth. And just like that, the Earth was then turned into a prison planet. But then on top of that, you have them say, you know what? Any other aliens out there in the universe, if they do go out of their way to commit some kind of crime, they'll serve their time on Earth as well. And so just like that, the Earth became a full-on prison planet for not just humans, but now any aliens who commit crimes somewhere else in the universe. And so just like that, we now have maximum security. But as we get into Gambit issue number 23, we're also kind of picking up with the idea of Ego the Living Planet. Now, for Ego, he was also sent over to the prison planet as well, but as a spore, so a smaller form of himself and everything. The problem was that in the earlier issues that we had covered for this event, we had learned that with him now being on Earth, he's now trying to consume the Earth, become one with the Earth. And so for our heroes, they have a few days or weeks at least, or the most, sorry, to kind of figure out a way to get rid of Ego before he does consume the entire planet. And so when we do switch over to New Orleans, what we're seeing right now is really more of Gambit and the Unified Guild trying their best to handle this kind of situation. Now, just in case we have anybody joining our coverage over the idea of Gambit, around this time in Marvel's timeline for the character Gambit, he was right now being the leader of a new guild, the Unified Guild. You see, the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild had finally decided to work together as one, but being led by Gambit. Now, the only reason why they're doing that right now, because there was this prophecy, the idea that you're going to have Gambit lead the guild into a new era, right? And so right now you have both guilds working together, being led by Gambit, but right now they're trying to protect New Orleans and they're struggling because it's Ego the Living Planet. Because the idea that you have these different body parts just popping up left and right. And even if you get rid of one body part, a new one appears just like that. And so for Gambit and his crew right now, he's kind of wondering what can they possibly do. Now, you didn't have our characters be confronted by a guy known as Hetsa, and I really hope I pronounced that name correctly because it ain't a normal name. Now, when it comes to Hetsa, what we learn here is that he is an alien who was also sent onto Earth to serve his time. But we also learn here that he had a code name. That code name was the Executioner. Now, that part right there, it's really big, and here's the reason why. Because in the 1990s, you had Marvel introduce 2 different executioners. Now, the first one would only go after what he believed as bad mutants. That's really it. Like, if you were a mutant, did nothing wrong, then most likely he would not come after you. Now, he retired, but then the last storyline that we had covered, better known as the Assassination Game, we saw a new one appear trying to kill off Gambit for some money. Now, he lost that battle, but he had disappeared at the end of that battle. So we had no idea who in the world was this new executioner. But the problem is now wondering who in the world is this guy right here known as Hetsa, who said his code name is the Executioner. But then we're kind of given this interlude, right? Now, this interlude is really being used to kind of explore the idea of what's going on behind the scenes, the new sun. You see, we pick up with the Courier and also the Fontanelle. Now, these two had both worked for the new sun. But in our last video for Gambit, we had learned the new sun is a Gambit that most likely came from a different reality. But also, the new son had Fontenelle go into the dreams of different people who were connected to Gambit to kind of learn more about his upbringing, kind of see how the two were raised differently in their two different realities. But getting back over to Hetza, we kind of begin to learn a tad bit about his origin story here, right? And we learn that on his home world, he was a security guard. Now, security guards had a special kind of armor, an armor that was very similar to the one that the Executioner had in previous storylines. Now, we also learned that for Hetza, he was a prisoner after being security guard. And the reason why, because there was a riot and he freaked out and ran away. And so because of that, they say, you know what? You are guilty of being a coward. Go to jail. Now, he was sentenced over to a Shi'ar Empire prison, but then they were all relocated over to Earth. Is the whole idea of maximum security. But once he was relocated to Earth, it's then him saying, like, I heard about the battle that took place between you and also the Executioner. Once I saw him, I realized he had the same kind of armor suit I worn back when I was security guard. So Hetha saying right now, the armor suit has the ability to teleport him back home, but it's also holding on to information on a way to slow down Ego the Living Planet, which right now will be great for Reed Richards and also Iron Man when it comes to saving the Earth at least. So you do have our boy agree to help Hessa get his hands on that armor suit. But this kind of leads into the second half of this storyline where we do see, Gambit, Hetza, and a few other members of the Thieves Guild right now, or Unified Guild, head over to, the facility that's currently holding on to the Executioner armor suit. Now, once they do arrive there, you then have Hetza being able to hand over a CD that contains information that could possibly help our heroes slow down Ego or possibly defeat Ego the Living Planet. You then have Hetza grab the armor and teleport away. Now, for our heroes are like, cool, you know what? A deal's a deal. We helped him. He helped us. Let's go ahead and go home. But for Gambit, he realized that for Hetza, he did not just teleport, he went back in time. And that right there could be a major problem. And so you didn't have Gambit use the armor suit as well to go back in time to hopefully stop Hetza from changing the timeline. Because let's not forget that for Hetza, he was a prisoner because of his cowardice, because he ran away while being security guard and a riot broke out. And so with him going back in time, he does see his past self and tell his past self, do not run away. Get back in there and help your fellow guards calm down this riot. Now the thing is, he would have died because the other guards who did not run away, they had died. And so while you have Hetza talking to his past self, you did have our boy Gambit arrive and say, stop what you're doing right now. Because what you're doing right now could, one, change the whole timeline, but two, this is not right. You're basically killing yourself because what you did in the past. Yes, you made a mistake, but why in the world should you die for the one mistake you made? Because you realize if your past self goes back in there and he dies, then you die in the present day. And so you have Gambit being able to stop Hetza from forcing his younger self to, basically die. And so once you do have our hero get back to the present day, you have the guild leave the facility, but now they have information that could possibly stop Ego the Living Planet. But then at the very last second, we learn who was the second Executioner. The second one was the new son. He was just wearing the armor suit for the heck of it, but also going after Gambit. Now, this leads into the final two issues of this series. With that, okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and begin our coverage, or really end our coverage over the idea of the Gambit series that came out of the late 1990s. Now, for the Gambit series, it did have 25 issues, right? So we're going to cover issues number 24 and 25 because 23 was really used more as a tie-in to Maximum Security, which we already covered earlier on in our coverage over Gambit in that event as well. But the last two issues are very intriguing to me. And the reason why I'm saying that because for issue number 24, it does wrap up all the loose ends when it comes to the idea of New Sun. Now, we have been seeing New Sun since the early days of the Gambit series, right? And we have learned that for a new son, that he is Gambit, but from a different reality. Now, in his reality, on his Earth, you had that Gambit being able to, well, destroy the entire planet. Like the Earth's still there, but everyone is dead. Every animal is dead. Vegetables, like fruits, everything is gone because of this one particular Gambit. And so as we get into the 24th issue of Gambit, is us now kind of learning the whole entire origin of New Sun, but also saying goodbye to this character as well. And so, as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, is us picking up with New Sun, but also with Gambit. But the thing is, they're on New Sun's Earth right now, and we're seeing New Sun trying to explain his whole entire origin over to Gambit. But it's him saying, like, I want you right now to look at my planet. Like, it's completely dead. There's no fruits or vegetables. There's no livestock. There's no people. Like, everything is dead here in my reality. Now, when it came to our two characters, they only came here or really only had access here because of Bill, another character that has the ability to open up portals that could lead it anywhere or like different realities. And so that's how New Sun was able to grab Gambit and bring Gambit over to this reality. But before we see New Sun go full detail when it comes to his, origin story, we do switch over to two characters, and that would be the Fontanelle and the Courier. Now, the Fontanelle is a character that we have met early on in our coverage over Gambit. She has the ability, right, to go into people's minds when they are dreaming. Now, she was kind of given a job by New Sun to use her powers to gather intel about Gambit and hand that intel over to New Sun. Now, when it comes to Courier, he or she has the ability to use his or her powers of shape-shifting. Now, for Courier, he's currently right now stuck in this female form. But either way, you have the two of them right now on the phone discussing the idea of saving Gambit's life. And so now it's time for us to dive into the origin of New Sun. Now, for New Sun, we learn very quickly here that for his parents, they were paid by the government to have a child. The reason why? Because of their genetic potential of their child, of course, being New Sun. Now, when it came to Alpha 1, this facility, they made sure to train New Sun early on so when his powers came, he would have almost full control of his abilities. And they were right. And then he blew up the entire facility. Now, he did go out his way to join the X-Men, right? The problem was that he killed off this reality version of the Phoenix. And so he was no longer able to be part of the X-Men. And so after that, he was kind of like this anti-hero, right? Where he would sometimes help the heroes out, but sometimes fight against the heroes as well. But after a while, he did run into Jean LeBeau. Now, for Jean LeBeau, as we all know, in the main Marvel universe, he is the father to, well, Gambit, right? The adoptive father to Gambit, but also was the leader of the Thieves Guild. Now, in the main Marvel universe, we have learned about this prophecy of the idea that Gambit would be the one to lead the Thieves Guild, the Assassin Guild together, better known as the Unified Guild, and bringing back the old kingdom. Now, that part right there, it's really important because when it came to New Sun, he met Jean, right? But more as a mentor and told New Sun, like, your goal for life is to bring back the old kingdom. Here comes the downfall. Because there's one part of the prophecy that literally says, towards the shining light of the sun. The person who will be the person to lead the unified guild will then lead everyone towards the shining light of the sun. That part right there is very literally true, because once you had New Sun and Jean kind of go through the actual like ritual, well, the energy of the old king from the old kingdom just poured into New Sun, and he was unable to take on that energy. And so once he had to release that energy, it wiped out everything across the entire world. Like everything died in a matter of an hour or two. And that's how bad it was for New Sun. And so that began this whole journey of going to different realities to make sure that other Gambits would not do the same thing as well on their Earths as a way to save lives of other realities. But while traveling the multiverse, he did arrive at the age of apocalypse reality. Now, as we all know, that reality was only created because of Legion, because you had Legion go back in time to kill off Magneto as a way to help out his father. Unfortunately, you had Legion kill off Charles Xavier. Now, once that happened, it gave birth to a brand new timeline, Age of Apocalypse. Now, the characters in that timeline, they were able to restore the original main Marvel universe by using different things like the Mcron crystal. But while you did have the main Marvel universe come back for New Sun, he was then able to travel into the main Marvel universe thanks to the Mcron crystal. And so once he had arrived, he began his plan to save this Earth. The thing was, his first plan was create a counter Earth. Now that plan right there fell apart because of Doctor Doom. But now he realized he has to do what he has to do to save this Earth. And that would be to kill off Gambit, our Gambit. Now, for Fontanelle and also the Courier, their main goal is to wake up Bill because Bill is the one who's right now allowing that portal to be open for the New Sun and Gambit. It's New Sun using Bill to access these other realities at this point in time in Marvel Comics. But anyways, you have Fontanelle go into the dream of Bill to wake him up. Now, with them being awoken, now their goal is to grab Gambit and bring him home to the main Marvel universe. And so that kind of leads into the second half of this chapter where it's really more of us now seeing Gambit fighting against New Sun. Now, by this point in the Gambit series, Gambit had learned a lot about his powers, and he has now reached new levels with his powers as well, allowing him the chance to go toe-to-toe with New Sun. But this is also Marvel saying, hey, the series is gonna end soon. So why not go ahead and take our boy Gambit and put him back where he used to be at, where he's just a regular guy who throws cars that explode. And that's really it. Like none of this God level stuff we see right now in the Gambit series. And so while you do have Gambit fighting against New Sun, you didn't have our boy put all his energy, who had a hard time saying that, his energy into New Sun. Now, with him doing that, New Sun is unable to hold on to that energy. And so for Gambit, at the very last second, you have Courier and Fontanelle grab him and pull him through a portal of Bill to bring him back home over to the main Marvel universe. But back on the other Earth for New Sun, because right now he's holding his energy and our Gambit energy, he's unable to hold all that energy. And so he explodes. And we're left to believe that he is now officially dead. That Earth has also exploded as well. And you really kind of have the issue end on the note where we do see Gambit, being back home now in his reality and also being confronted by Courier. And he's happy to see her and he does kiss Courier, which for me, I'm kind of like, wait, hold on. Because Courier is technically a man who's right now just trapped in a female form, but they still kiss and Courier liked it. So there's that too. But anyways, you do have the two of them right now kind of wondering what's next for our boy Gambit. Now, the final issue of Gambit's longest run in comics was issue number 25. Now, I find the cover a tad bit funny, and the reason why, because you do have the book kind of promote the idea that this is the beginning of a brand new story arc. It's technically not, but I guess it could be for a different series because, again, this was the last issue for Gambit. Now, around the same time, Bishop book also got canceled, and you did have Marvel give us a 6-issue mini-series for both Gambit and also Bishop. So I'm guessing the storyline may continue in that book. I don't know because I did not read that book yet. But either way, this storyline does also kind of get wrapped up in this one particular issue as well. So it's kind of weird to say, hey, you know what? This is a new beginning for a new story arc. Now, as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we do pick up with Gambit, but as a child. Now, with this flashback, it's kind of showing that at a young age for Gambit, by this point, the young boy had already been taken in by the Thieves Guild. The problem is that being out there in the field, he's still kind of rough around the edges. He would kind of get different steps that are needed to make sure your mission is successful. Like, for example, right now, we see him trying to steal this amulet off a character known as Mambo Mastiff. You see, for Gambit, while trying to steal the amulet, he made too much noise. So, of course, you have Mambo wake up and realize there's some kid right now above him trying to steal his amulet. Now, for Gambit, he does get it and he does run outside. The problem is that while you have Gambit trying to escape, well, he tries to use a tree to get down. The tree branch snaps and he falls hard to the ground. And of course, he also drops the amulet near some alligators. Now, for Gambit, as a young boy, he still believes he has the ability, right, to grab the necklace. But he is stopped by another character. And now will be Hercule. I want to say it's Hercule, like short for Hercules. I don't know. But either way, for this character, he does kind of help save Gambit's life as a young boy before he was eaten by those alligators. Now, you also have Urkel working for Mambo, so he does take Gambit right back over to Mambo. Now, at first, when it comes to Mambo, he wants to go ahead and get rid of Gambit completely. Like, he's like, hey, you know what? I'm upset with you because what you tried to steal was the last piece of jewelry I had for my wife, the mother to my daughter. So how dare you try to steal that item from me? Now, for Gambit, he's kind of like, listen, how about this? We'll make a deal. Anytime down the road, if you need me to steal something or do something for you, I will have to come here and do it no matter what. And so for Mambo, he's kind of like, you know what? As a young boy, this is a bad deal for you, but a great deal for me. So I'll go ahead and accept that deal. And so, of course, as you all know, as we do switch over to the present day, that deal will come back into play again in the present day. But as we do transition over to the present day, what we're seeing really now is really more of Gambit right now at this like event where all these different people who were invited have like a ton of money. Now, the thing is for Gambit, he only came to this party to be a thief again, of course, but you also have some other people right now trying to rob all the rich people. And so for our good old boy Gambit, he's like, you know what? Let me go ahead and step in and help protect these people. And so while you do have him be a hero, like he is being part of the X-Men, he's still kind of like, you know, even though I did take these guys down, I can still rob some people here. But then he's confronted by Urkel, who's kind of like, hey, do you remember Mambo? Well, now it's time for you to go ahead and finish your part of the deal. You did say anytime he needs you for something, he can call you. Well, that time has now arrived. And so as we do switch over to Gambit and Hercules heading over to the home of Mambo, for Gambit, he kind of realized there's something off. Because, for example, when he does ask Hercules, like, what kind of job does Mambo need me to do? He can't even tell Gambit what kind of job it is. Instead, he begins to cry. But then on top of that, when it comes to Gambit, when he does arrive the home of Mambo, he kind of realized the mansion right now has been worn down a lot. Like it looks like it's falling apart. And so for Gambit, he's kind of wondering what has happened to Mambo over the years. Now, when he does walk in, it's Mambo crying, but he does get excited about the idea of seeing Gambit, being like, yes, you did come. This is great. I need your help to save the life of my daughter. And it's like, what in the world do you mean by that? See, we learn here that for Minnie, the daughter of Mambo, you see, while growing up, her and her father, they kind of began to grow apart from one another. For her main goal right now, her main focus was her career. And for Mambo, even though he was really proud of his daughter, they still would have different kinds of arguments over different kinds of things. But then for Minnie, she met somebody that she fell in love with. Abrian Ducrest. Now, for Abrian, it does seem like he has the ability to steal women's heart. And yes, you heard that right, correctly, because right after she met him, she had fell into a coma. But then on her chest, where her heart should be at, there is this wooden door. When you open that door, there's only a bright light. and that's really it. But it's her father, Mambo, saying that that man most likely stole her heart. And until her heart is returned to her body, unfortunately, she'll stay in this coma. Some kind of voodoo right now is keeping her alive. And so for Gambit, he hates the idea of seeing many like this. And he does agree to help Mambo to go after, well, this Abrian person. And really for Gambit, he was able to locate Abrian very easily. I mean, like literally the next page, oh, hey, there he is right there. Now, when it comes to Gambit, though, while trying to get close to Abrian, he's then confronted by some random guy, right? This big dude who hits pretty hard and knock our boy down. Now, for Gambit, he does get right back up again, and you know our boy, he has ways to get answers out of anybody. So he's kind of like, listen, I can blow your mouth up or things on your body to get the answer I need from you because right now you don't want to mess with me. And so after a while, you do have Gambit being able to get the answers that he was looking for. And so you do have the story kind of wrap up pretty quickly here. And the reason why I'm saying that, because once you do have Gambit being able to locate Abrian, this battle, it's very short-lived. I mean, very, very short-lived to the point where that you have Gambit find Abrian and realize that the dude has been collecting all of these different hearts. But in the middle of this warehouse, there's one big heart that most likely belongs to Abrian. And so you have Gambit just go out his way to blow up that one heart. Once he does, Abrian disappears, and all the other hearts in that warehouse, they go back to their rightful owners, like, for example, the idea of Minnie. And you did have the book end on the note where you really have Gambit being able to get with Minnie. I mean, like literally get with her. They're right now in some kind of, vacation together away. And her dad keeps calling because he knows that most likely for Gambit, he's with his daughter right now and doing you know what. And so the book kind of ends on the note where it's just our boy Gambit, being ladies' man. And the book ends on that note right there. So that's the last issue of the Gambit series. Now, for Gambit, he did have other books down the road, like 2004, I want to say, and 2012. 2014, so he will have a few more books for us to cover down the road. Unfortunately, there was a mini series he did have with Bishop, but right now the book is not online right now for me to read. So unfortunately, I cannot access that storyline. With that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.